Thank you.
Hi, Michelle. This is Jay Marchand. Do you hear us okay?
Yes, I can.
Okay.
Thank you.
We're good to go. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the January 20th regular meeting of the Chico Unified School District Board of Education. We just finished with a closed session where we considered a settlement agreement. And the board voted unanimously to ratify a settlement agreement to resolve a special education due process complaint filed against the district. Pursuant to the agreement, the district will establish a compensatory education fund in the amount of $28,000 for use by students and educational services and assessments, and partially reimburse the parents for attorney fees. Under the express terms of the agreement, the board's ratification of agreement does not constitute an admission of liability by the district. Okay, flag salute. Thank you. Let's salute the flag there. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Okay, are there any announcements? Are any items from the floor? Oh, I'm sorry. Dr. Kaiser?
I just wanted to recognize, as we got informed by an email, that John Vincent and the staff at, what was it, Sierra View? Sherwood, I'm sorry. John Vincent, Sherwood, and BCOE all collaborated together to get high-speed internet available to that school. And I think that's a phenomenal example of the intersection of people with talent and the best interest of kids at heart. So thank you.
Thank you. And thank you, Dr. Kaiser. Negotiations update from Jim Hanlon.
Yes, so we met with CUTA last Thursday. They asked for a review of the governor's proposed state budget, which Jacqueline Kruger covered quite well. We discussed issues on all-day kindergarten. We have 4 remaining elementary schools that will transition to full-day kindergarten starting next year, and that will mean all of our schools in the district at that point will be full-day kindergarten. We talked about a couple of compensation issues, salary steps on the salary schedule as far as for part-time staff, and then also ongoing discussions about eliminating the 31st salary step. We're also accepting clinicians from the county into the Chico Unified School District, and we're talking about job descriptions and other things, caseloads, those types of things as far as that transition goes. We expect the clinicians to join us next year from the county. With regards to CSEA, after last semester, we concluded negotiations for the semester, but we are waiting for dates for this semester from Sacramento. We expect those dates anytime now, and we'll get back to negotiating. Thank you.
And thank you. My apologies. I did miss out of order item number 5, items from the floor. And we do have some people signed up to address us. John, you want to begin with our first caller, who would be Erica Aguilera?
Yes, I'd like to welcome Zuhei Main. She's one of our targeted case managers from Chico High School, and she's going to be translating our first caller. Zuhei? As she's calling that number, just a request of the board, Do you still want to stick to the 3 minutes, given that there's translation?
Yeah,
6?
we have
Okay.
a policy where the translation time is not held against the speaker time.
Thank you.
Muy buenas noches, Erika. Estás en vivo aquí en la Junta del Comité Concejal del Distrito. ¿Cuál es tu comentario?
Buenas noches. Sí, mi comentario sería que a mí sí me gustaría que mis hijas o que las escuelas se abrieran para que mis hijas pudieran asistir a todo el día a clases regulares.
Good evening. My comment is I would like for my daughters to attend school full day, regular full day schedule. ¿Te gustaría mencionar otro comentario o es todo?
Pues las razones serían porque hay 3 factores muy importantes. En nuestra vida ha cambiado bastante. Uno es emocional, otro es económico y pues educativo. La educación anda muy mal.
There's 3 factors as to the reasons why. One is the emotional state, the economic state, the financial state, and also just the general quality of education.
Can I ask a question of clarification to her?
¿Te pueden hacer una pregunta para clarificar?
¿Sí?
Yes.
What are the economic reasons behind her request?
¿Cuáles son algunas de las razones financieras o económicas?
Pues en cuestión de que tenemos poco tiempo para trabajar y por el hecho que tenemos que regresar por nuestros hijos a la escuela porque solo van 3 horas, no se puede trabajar mucho tiempo como antes, se le batalla bastante.
Is due to the struggle to have to interrupt work, so they're losing hours of work because they have to interrupt their time to drop off and pick up their children from school.
Please tell her thank you very much.
Muchísimas gracias, Erika, por tu comentario.
Gracias por escucharme.
Thank you
Buenas noches.
for listening. Good night. Buenas noches.
Okay, I'm calling Michelle Yesvik. Hi, Michelle. I'm going to put you on speakerphone. You'll be addressing the school board. Okay, just a second.
Okay.
Go ahead, Michelle.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Good evening, Superintendent Staley, President Robinson, trustees, staff, and guests. My name is Michelle Yesvik, and I am the director at Sherwood Montessori. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. My public comment is to highlight how staff from BCOE, Chico Unified, and Sherwood came together to solve the problem of Sherwood's poor internet. The neighborhood has internet that is inadequate for the increasing use of technology in our classrooms and the progressive use of more bandwidth. And because Chapman is a Title I school, the fiber optic system that was provided with Title I funds was not accessible to Sherwood legally because we're not a Title I school. The pandemic demanded a solution, and a Zoom meeting that was led by David Shippen, who's an IT consultant and a spouse to one of our teachers, Teresa Shippen, brought together Patrick Bassetti and John Vincent from Chico Unified, and Steve Monahan and Matt DeSalvo from BCOE, and Steve Duke and myself from Sherwood. And having David as a fluent speaker of tech helped to push that project forward. And now we have a path forward that includes E-rate and high-speed fiber optic internet. And it was thanks to that spirit of interagency cooperation that we often see in Butte County. We saw it during Measure K and during and after the campfire, and now for bringing technology to Sherwood. And I just want to highlight that good news and point out that it's the positive leadership from the Chico Board of Education and Dr. Staley that caused these values of helping one another when the time calls for it to make a project like this happen.
Thank you, Michelle.
Thank you, Michelle. Have a good night.
And Patrick and John are both here. Thank you.
I'm now calling Amber Brown. Hi, Amber. I'm going to put you on speakerphone, and you'll be addressing the school board, okay? Okay, go ahead, Amber.
Hi. I'm going to read a letter that I sent to the school board. I'll do my very, very best to keep it under 3 minutes. Hopefully you guys can give me a little minute grace. Hi, my name is Amber Brown, and I have 6 children, 5 of which are school age, attending 2 different schools within the district. I'm here to address the need for children to go back to school full-time with reasonable precautions. I understand the concern of community spread. However, children having limited time at school is not preventing spread. In my opinion, it is contributing more than it is helping. Parents are mostly still working, so children are being cared for by family, friends, and yes, grandparents. All these overwhelming restrictions are doing is preventing schools from liability and putting undue stress on children and parents. There is no doubt in my mind that 6 feet apart and masks can protect you from this disease. I know this from personal experience. I also know that children and young healthy teachers don't require extreme protection. I appreciate the schools trying to limit my children and their teachers from exposure, but I do not agree with the lengths the administration are taking. The CDC says when possible. Some of what they are asking is not possible if we want to provide children with a well-rounded education and healthy environment. This speaks volumes to when I am receiving email after email from schools about childhood trauma and suicide prevention hotline numbers. I think everyone knows our children are the collateral damage and, when possible, needs to be reevaluated. I do not say this lightly. I say this as an informed, well-educated adult in regard to this disease. My youngest daughter has cystic fibrosis, a rare genetic disease that is progressive. Essentially, she will die from it. That is our daily reality. So in March, I was scared, really scared. I knew that COVID-19 was serious for her. By May, I had done my research and discovered that other, much older CFers had contracted and survived COVID-19 at home with no additional medical intervention, just extra breathing treatments. So I was hopeful, but still cautious and vigilant. By October, I had seen my daughter's team of doctors, and the Cystic Fibrosis Foundation website had officially come out with more definitive information. Bottom line, if she had not had a transplant or advanced stage lung disease, she was no longer high-risk category. I checked again with her team of doctors, and they all agreed. The Cystic Fibrosis Foundation's conclusions were
30 seconds left.
With the Cystic Fibrosis Foundation's conclusions, and furthermore, did not recommend keeping her out of school or activities. We still proceed every day with caution and weigh the risk to her daily. However, we have learned that we have to make sure our daughter and her 5 siblings live a fulfilled life as well. As you can imagine, this has been and will be a continuous struggle for our family, even when there is containment of this virus. I no longer have patience for people that after 10 months have not
Thank you,
figured out
Ms.
how to
Brown.
live.
Your time is concluded.
Ms. Brown, thank you for contacting the school board. Thank you. Okay, we are going to hear from Hilda Hernandez.
Okay, I'm going to go ahead and call.
Bueno,
Sí, buenas, Hilda. Estás en vivo en el Comité Concejal del Distrito. ¿Cuál es tu comentario?
sí, buenas tardes, buenas noches.
Good evening.
Pues yo no, mi comentario o mi opinión es que yo estoy de acuerdo a que la escuela se abra durante todo el día completo, que no sea un pedacito nada más.
I would like for the school to be open full-time on a regular, not just for a small amount of time, but full-time.
En mi caso, porque yo no estoy teniendo muchos problemas para transportar a mi hijo, es muy poquito tiempo, estoy trabajando, tengo que pagar. Por otro lado, pues mi hijo le gusta estar allá, no quiere estar en casa porque en casa no aprende nada. Y pues yo estoy de acuerdo a que sea todo el día.
I'm in agreement that it could be full-time. In my case, it's due for transportation. I have to find someone to transport my child and also for payment as well. And in addition, my son would like to be full-time at school.
Pues ese es mi comentario.
That is my comment. Bueno, muchísimas gracias, Hilda.
De nada.
Que tenga buenas noches.
Buenas noches.
Good evening.
Okay, and our last speaker, I'll be calling Casey Taylor. Hi, Casey, it's John Shepherd. You're going to be addressing the school board in just a second, okay? Go ahead, Casey.
Good evening, Superintendent Staley, President Robinson, trustees, staff, guests. My name is Casey Taylor. I'm the Executive Director of Achieve Charter School of Paradise. I want to first thank you for your hospitality and support during the last 2 years as we have operated temporarily here in Chico, serving our Paradise families who were displaced after the fire. Because many of our families and staff have decided to remain in Chico, we've been working with your school leaders and the City of Chico to remain permanently. We are submitting our permanent development permit and use permit applications to the City of Chico this month, and we'll be submitting a charter petition for our kindergarten through 8th grade school to this board at your February 17th meeting. We're also making plans to reopen our Paradise School on our campus in Paradise this fall. Our school is currently authorized by the Paradise Unified School District, so in order to reopen our school for our families returning to Paradise there and keep our school in Chico to serve our current families, our current school here in Chico must be authorized by the Chico Unified School District, as we are not currently authorized to run 2 campuses or a campus outside of our authorizing school district. So far, ed code waivers and a temporary use permit from the City of Chico have allowed us to operate here for the last 2 years. Now, we know that school facility space in Chico is super limited, and Achieve, our organization, along with our insurance company, have invested close to $6 million in the development of our temporary location in Chico on East Avenue behind Life Church across from Pleasant Valley High School. We want to ensure that this significant investment of taxpayer dollars remains and continues to serve students in this community. Likewise, we continue to serve a majority of students who are campfire survivors, and we've been able to offer unique programs and services to support our students, families, and staff as we recover from that trauma, now layered with the additional trauma of COVID. So I'd be happy to meet with any of you to answer any questions, take suggestions or feedback as we plan for the future. But again, I want to thank you for providing a safe place for our families and staff to heal these last 2 years. Thank you for your time.
Thanks, Casey.
Thank you. Okay, we are now on to our consent calendar.
Can we thank our translator?
Oh, yes,
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. You did a fabulous job, and we appreciate you being here.
Thank you. The consent calendar are items that are general in nature and can usually be approved all in one motion. However, if any member of the board or the public wishes to pull an item from the consent calendar for consideration outside of the general motion, now would be the time. Does anyone want to pull anything from the consent calendar? If not, I need a motion to approve.
So move.
I'll second that.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded that we approve the consent calendar. I'll take your vote in person, starting with Ms. Dalby.
Hi.
Kaiser, aye.
Tennis, aye.
Lando, aye.
Robinson, aye. Thank you. Discussion action calendar. Discussion action is part of, this work is being done by the board in order to put some of our processes in an approved symmetry so that we are all on the same page. Mr. Landau, have you had a chance to review the Rosenberg rules and compare them to our board handbook, and what is your conclusion on a recommendation?
I have reviewed several different parliamentary procedures. I would very much like to see Rosenberg's or some form of it added to our governance handbook, but I certainly would propose adopting it at this point for our meetings moving forward. Would.
Yes, thank you. Dr. Kaiser?
I also thought that it was very clean and simplified, not simple, but simplified. I would like to suggest, though, that we might consider having someone sort of designated as a parliamentarian if we get stuck, since it's relatively new for us to have this as a guideline. So that was just a suggestion.
I believe our board handbook has the board president as parliamentarian, although I could designate if the board has a wish in that case.
My experience with other boards where the chair, has a key role is that's asking a lot for you to go back and forth between the rules. So I just would suggest maybe, I don't know. I hate to trust Jay with anything critical, but something like that.
Dr. Kaiser, I know of your experience in using parliamentary procedure. And as a vice president of the board, would you be willing to be available for me to defer to if there is a question about procedure?
Yes, I could do that.
Is there an objection from the board? Hearing none, is there a motion to approve? Yes.
I actually have a question for Mr. Lando. I think, because Mr. Lando, I think you're taking the lead on, you kind of initiated this investigation, right? And why are these Rosenberg's rules of order better than what you've been using?
We haven't had a set procedure. We don't have a set parliamentary procedure in the handbook at this point. So I think we looked at Rosenberg's and we looked at Roberts, of course. Roberts is in many ways suited for organizations with much larger membership and deals a lot with things like committees and the presentation of committees. Rosenberg's is a little bit pared down and is used often by city councils and other small deliberative bodies such as ours.
Why do you feel that we would benefit from using these?
Simply to make sure that everyone knows what's going on, what step of the process we're in, and we have a playbook and a rule book to look at to make sure everyone's, there's a rule of law, such as it was to our conversation.
Is a concern that our conversations here might have a tendency to get out of hand?
Yeah, I think it's a valid concern.
I haven't observed that. It seems to me that at the dais, in the last, I guess, 9-10 months or so that I've been closely observing these meetings, I've never seen anything that would seem to be any kind of argument or point of order, or the, not having a reasonable conversations. So I'm reluctant to embrace this personally, because I think that one problem that we're having right now in our community is with the public being kept out of our meetings because of the COVID risk, with all the masks, and so we're losing a lot of nonverbal communication with each other and also with the public. There's a kind of for me, and I think maybe I speak on behalf of some members of our public, that there might be kind of a chilling effect of them not being able to come, us all having masks on, and I would like for these meetings to be as conversational as they could be. As long as people respect each other's opinions and everybody's getting a chance to be heard and there's general order, personally, I'm not seeing a need for these rules of order for our meetings.
Your complaint is recognized.
Ms. Dalby?
Thank you. In rather timely fashion, I received a handy book today from CSBA, and I was reading through it earlier, and I just wanted to reiterate some things that are in here about rules of order. So while they do not help to provide order, the term order does not refer to an absence of chaos, but rather to a sequence, actions or decisions made in the proper order, and to rules governing debate and voting procedures. And I have more to add in a second, but what's important there, for example, we accidentally went out of order on the agenda today, so what would have been appropriate is for somebody who noticed that to raise a point of order and interrupt Mr. Hanlon to go back to the proper sequence of the agenda. Why use rules of order? The CSBA published book asks. They have two strong benefits for school boards. They protect the rights of everyone. They are designed to ensure that meetings are democratic, offering three different kinds of protection. First, the equality of each member of the body is protected. Each board member has the same rights and privileges to make a range of motions. These include, but are not limited to, making, seconding, and voting on motions, requesting information, asking clarification, posing questions, participating in free and open discussion. And it goes by majority rules. And then they simplify the work of the governing body. It goes into detail. I'm sure you'll be able to look more into that. But the point of our rules of order are to make this a more democratic process where we all have equitable input and feel our voices are heard, and also are not interrupting out of order from the agenda. So that's just the input that I wanted to provide.
Dr. Kaiser?
There's another aspect to this, and we got this when we were being updated on the Brown Act, which is that we are confined to doing things in a sequence in order to not be violating the Brown Act. So I hadn't seen this particular format. I'm used to being in board meetings where, we definitely are following parliamentary. And again, I thought that was a nice summary, how convenient CSBA happened to drop in on us. But what I liked about Rosenberg is it is pretty simple and laid out, and so I thought that would be appropriate.
Is there any further discussion? I need a motion to approve.
I would like to move that we adopt Rosenberg's Rule of Order as our
Second.
parliamentary system.
I have a motion by Mr. Landau, a second by Dr. Kaiser. Any further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Nay.
Thank you. That passes 4 to 1. And just to remind too that when we do our updates in July, we would want to add reference to this being our guiding document in our policy handbook. Yes, in our governance handbook when July gets here. Okay, number 2 is discussion action item on public input at board meetings in compliance with COVID restrictions. I have Erica down. Thank you. There's Erica. Ms. Smith?
Good evening, Board. So public comment is essential and a required component of effective board governance. Prior to COVID-19, remote participation was not included in the Brown Act meeting protocols. The public participation process is being brought forward tonight to review the process the board would like to utilize for the duration of the COVID stay-at-home order. The goals of this agenda item are to ensure an opportunity for public comment and participation, to receive a range of views and representation of opinions from all stakeholder groups. Some of the considerations as you begin to discuss this is the fact that our intent is to try and get to the greatest extent possible a board representative of viewpoints from the public. Some of the things that we want to make sure is that we allow for increased public participation opportunities and that we're able to allow for equity of opportunity and to clearly define a process to hear a representation of opinions from all of our different stakeholder groups. Some of these that have been brought forward are students, staff, parents, community members, and other representatives within the community. Included in your board agenda packet, there is a draft of a public comment card. So this still is the speaker card. Some of the changes that you may note is that per law, a speaker is only required to fill out the phone number and agenda item. So they're the only ones that are required fields. All the other fields are optional. In addition, we added the stakeholder groups, either first come, first serve, or random from each group. And then a brief statement to the board is also available if members of the community would like to provide that information. So we are bringing forward this draft based on recommendations and comments that we've received for your discussion.
I have one question of clarification for you, Erica. You mentioned in your summary that the board will have an opportunity to review the public participation process that has been utilized during the COVID stay-at-home order. Is there a COVID stay-at-home order right now? Per what institution? Because I thought that the stay-at-home order had been lifted.
The other restrictions that were put in place have been lifted as a result of our ICU, but we're still under the governor's stay-at-home order.
Thank you.
If I may.
Dr. Kaiser?
I'm sorry, go.
Erica, I know there's been, and in effect, your speaker category recognizes that some concern there would be a way to allow different segments of our community to have a verbal interaction with us. Everybody can submit an email. But is the context that we would somehow randomize each speaker category, assuming we had, too many in a particular group?
So we do have some guidance in that, just knowing that right now we're currently utilizing a first come, first serve basis that is a lawful way of doing things. We also have the option where we could do a randomization for large agenda items when there's a large number of public input. That could be done by the category grouping. One suggestion would be to take 2 members from each group and then randomize it so you'd get a representation and then continue from there. But that is completely up to the board and how they would like to move forward with the prioritization of speakers.
I guess the follow-up to that would be, I'm kind of assuming that we wouldn't every time have a large number of potential speakers, so we might need to be flexible between, random or categories.
So, for example, tonight we only had 5 speakers and we have time for 5.
Right.
So, we just took them in random order.
But I'm flashing back to Action News covering Shasta and Chico, and if the title had been, "We Need to Play," I think we'd have a lot more people, and especially in the student category. So that's what I mean. We may have to be recognizing a topic's pertinence to a particular category.
Yeah, I think that, we did have conversation with legal counsel on this today. And I think we would need to be careful there about placing priority on one group over another. If we are taking equitable input from each group, we're in good shape, and we did confirm that today. Both Kevin and I separately, and Erica as well, confirmed that. But to give preference to a group would be an issue.
Ms. Dalby?
I just wanted to ask a follow-up question on that, because you brought up students. Is students included in that? Or would we be able to even pause the rules to allow for more time if we have student speakers and then still allow our 30-minute public speaking session? I don't know if anybody has any input on that, or if students would be included in the entire group legally and.
So our past practice and in our protocols has been that if we have students present, and that was one of the reasons for wanting to identify students, is that we would give them priority in the speaking so that they could come to a board meeting when we were allowed to have people present and speak, and then go home and do their work, not have to wait till the end. And I think we would still want to do that. I mean, that's our number one priority is our students. We would still want to have them go first, but I don't think that we could say we're going to hear from more speakers that are students than we are, say, from parents. At least, Kevin, was that your understanding as well today?
Have you all had time to take a look at the possible procedure recommendations approval? Any more discussion? Yes, Ms. Dalby?
I'd like to just clarify at what point in our item the public comments section happens. So is it before or after our discussion, or do we hear the presentation from the board and then get public comment, and then we have our deliberation and our discussion, and then put a motion to the floor? Where are we at on that?
Mr. Landau?
If I may, that is happily covered in the rules of order sheet in front of you, wherein we get a motion in a second, we recognize by the chair. Oh, sorry, I'm in the wrong side. The very first life of a motion, the first section there. We ask technical questions of staff first, then we get public comment, then we have a motion, then we debate the motion, then we vote.
And also, is there a piece in here that allows for us to interact with public commenters, or are we only here to spectate?
If the public comment is on an agenda item up for action and a board member needs to ask a question of clarification, that's where that process comes in. However, it's not meant to be a debate, it's just a clarifying question. Is that, okay. And we're not to get into debate or exchange with comments from the floor. That's a whole different process. We're talking here about items that are on the agenda and the process for commenting on those.
And then, so, sorry, just one more question is, has there been a discussion about allowing the speaker to finish their sentence before cutting them off at the end of their time? It's something that I feel like it kind of is a bad show for us to just cut somebody off, even though we have our 3-minute limit, and I respect that. But, you know, just cutting somebody off in the middle of their last sentence just feels a little.
They get warned.
I understand that.
It has been our practice to interrupt and end. In the many years that we have stuck with times for presentations, that has been the practice of the president of the board.
I do think that, you know, we could say, you know, when Mr. Hanlon gives the 30 minutes, or when the board says, or 30 seconds, you know, we could say there are 30 seconds remaining, please summarize your, you know, please end your statement or summarize your comments.
One of the difficulties, I'm sorry, did any other board members have a comment? I wanted to comment at the end. Tom?
If we're going back to, if we're still. Forgive me, if we're still on this, we've kind of drifted a little bit. If we're talking about the speaker category still, I would like to see some kind of firm rule about if we have more than 10 speakers, then we'll go to a randomized system where each group that's present gets at least one speaker. Is that what, I would want to see some wording on that, I guess.
I don't know that has to be, I mean, we've already said 30 minutes, and we've already said 3 minutes per speaker. It would seem like once we see the number of speaker cards submitted, which has to be by noon, we would be able to make that, you know, determination ahead of time.
There's also another common practice with boards and taking public comment is when there are many people to comment on the same issue, they reduce the 3 minutes to 2 minutes is the usual practice. And we always have that option as well to try and get more people into the comment period. One of the issues that bothers me is whether or not the public understands that our email comment process is working so well that we get all of these comments. And quite usually in the week leading up to a board meeting, and have a chance to read them completely. There's no issue with being able to hear people on the phone. If we, or at least my practice is that if I have a question in order to clarify information that a writer has submitted, you know, I'll call for clarification from school district administration to find out if the person's information is correct. Or being able to get back to the person to ask them for clarification. The other thing that I feel is a significant plus for people to use that public comment tool is it allows you to share personal things about the impact of whatever you're commenting on your family or your student, and you can get it to the board member without having to make a public statement on the phone. And I believe that we get more candid information from the public using that format. It's not something that's subjected to, you know, public scrutiny. But we have to, if we are going to be in this format for the next number of months of meetings, we do need to put together a process that is going to accommodate communication, that you know, that meets the board's needs as well as the public's needs. Ms. Kaiser?
I move number 2, the public input at board meetings in compliance with COVID restrictions.
I'd like to raise a point of order.
Ms. Dalby, what was that request?
I'd like to raise a point of order. I believe in our, in the order of things, are we not taking public comment before we have motions on the floor?
No, she just said it's the other way around.
We receive public comment after there's been a motion and a second, so we know, and they know, what to discuss. Tom, you're checking the cheat sheet?
No, it is public comment on the issue before the motion is worded and completed.
How do we know whether or not we have public comment?
So I was just going to say, that's, in this COVID environment, if we don't get the card, the speaker card, prior to the noon cutoff, we won't have public comment. In a traditional setting, when we have members in the audience, people could, if they were here, come up to the speaker at that time if they had a question. So right now, we would know, but I still think it's a good process to say this is when we would have public comment.
Yes.
Even though we know, or we can make this statement, we have no request for public comment on this item, and then move on, just to get us in that pattern.
Did that answer your question, Mr. Tennis? Mr. Tennis?
Is it possible to allow speaker cards to be submitted right up until the moment?
Ms. Smith, can you answer that? What's the?
Well, I can answer that. We have been really struggling just to get them all in and processed, and then to John, just through this system now, by having them submitted by noon. It would take, you know, and I will tell you, I am trying to do that. If you notice, I've got a few screens going here, so that if somebody does email to public comment, that I can see that they are doing that. But I'm not sure it's a sustainable way to do that.
Point of order, Madam Chair. I did make a motion. I didn't hear a second. So is anyone going to second?
There hasn't been a second yet. Okay, I will second the motion. Mr. Lando?
And I would like to ask a question before we go ahead to vote. Because the item on the agenda simply says public input at board meetings, I know we have a sample of the virtual speaker card, and that I like very much. I am unclear still on whether we are also voting to prioritize certain groups if we have more than a certain number of speakers.
Kelly, I believe that legal counsel advised that that was not something we should do.
So if we have 10 speakers, I mean, I guess it depends. If it's items from the floor, we have set aside 15 minutes. So that would be 5 speakers on items from the floor. In the first, we do have a 45-minute items from the floor later at the end of the agenda. On the flip side, if it is an agenda item, input into an agenda item, you have said that we'll have 30 minutes, correct? So that's 10 speakers. So we'd have to differentiate between the two. But I guess I would ask that if we know there's students, we should prioritize the students regardless of, you know, instead of making them go 10th. But the others, if there's 10, they're all going to get to speak.
Well, yes.
Am I not, maybe I'm not understanding your question.
Yeah, my point is, if we have an issue where there is more speakers than we have allotted time for, is there some system, or
Then
are
we
we
would prioritize.
discussing so that we hit at least one member of each group?
Right, and so we would prioritize all 10 speakers then at that point.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure that was clarified. Thank you.
So since I know this is new for our audience, are we going to now ask for public comment on this? That was the context of the motion and the second. So now, right, the public can identify themselves as wanting to comment?
Yeah, this would be the point at which we would ask for public comment, actually earlier, and we have no public comment.
Yes.
I believe there's a motion on the floor, but I actually need it repeated to me, please.
I'm sorry, Ms. Dalby, what was your request?
I'm not clear on what the motion on the floor is.
A motion was made by Board Vice President Kaiser to move public input for board meeting in compliance with COVID restrictions, seconded by Board President Robinson. Is the current motion on the floor.
Yeah, if I may, I mean, there's no there. That doesn't tell us what we're voting to adopt, I think is the problem.
I was utilizing the speaker card framework that we have a draft of.
Oh, I understand that.
Would somebody like to restate the motion in different language?
Well, the speaker card information is fairly long. You want me to read the whole thing?
You could just say that you want to move that we adopt the draft.
Oh, yeah, okay.
Yeah.
I'd move to adopt the draft of the Board of Education speaker card process developed by our communication specialist, Erica.
Also, do we need a new second at this point? Or that it's clarification of the motion on the?
That
It
was
was
a
just
clarification of the
clarification.
motion, and since I seconded it, I agreed that does clarify it for the members before they vote.
Thank you.
Are we ready now?
I just want to make sure I have full clarification.
Right.
Sorry. So this motion is to approve the speaker card. Is there a bigger picture of the complete process? Like choosing, if there's 30 speakers who sign up for one agenda item, how are we selecting who fits in that time frame? Is that a different conversation, is that
The
part of it? 'Cause
clarification.
I'm not seeing that in here.
The clarification was presented as a legal constraint that we would randomize between these groups, still staying with the 30 minutes and the number of speakers. We
So-
can't preferentialize one person or one group.
Although I think what the question is, and I believe Ms. Dalby's right, we need to clarify that in the motion, is do we want just to do a complete random, everyone that is submitted, we will know who they are, but we just do the random sorting? Or do we want to do the random sorting and then take 2 from each group as speakers? So to add clarity, because you can do it either way and be legal.
My suggestion would be that we use these categories and randomize if we have to among them. We know that some issues, and we've had some very elegant student speakers on things that they felt were really impactful to them. So that would be my clarification.
Mr. Tennis?
I have a final comment about this proposal based on the clarification that's been given. I think I'm going to be against this proposal, and the reason is that I think that what we have in our system right now is there's a recognition of merit, and a question of merit in my mind, that if people are actively following the agenda process and if they're really eager to speak in front of the board, then in those cases, oftentimes they've put a lot of thought into their comments, and maybe they've taken time to write a big, fancy, impressive speech. And I feel that not randomizing it gives some recognition to those people who really want to be heard and their heart is really, really into it. So at this point, I'm inclined to vote against this proposal if it involves randomizing speakers, rather than if it involves moving away from first come, first served.
Yes, Ms. Dalby?
I think I see the value in randomizing overall to create a more equitable process. The first come, first serve model provides a platform for people who, as you said, are merit-based and allow for people who are ready for that agenda to be posted and jump on it right away, and then you have a flurry of people who want to speak because, maybe they, are at a agenda release party and they're ready to put in their speaker cards, right? And that totally blocks out the ability for anybody who's catching up or really busy with their work week or just got done with a 15-hour workday and couldn't be there to put in a speaker card. So I would like to consider fully randomizing, or at least taking some kind of randomization into consideration for an equitability piece. If we're thinking of it in terms of like pro versus con, if you're in the pro group or the con group and being equal, right? If there are 20 people who sign up and 5 of them are on one side of an issue and 15 of them are on the other side of the issue, but we only select the first come, first serve who, maybe that first 5 who are on one side and then the next 5 are on the other side, it looks like it's 50-50. But if we take it randomized, kind of in a scientific analytical process, statistically speaking, a random order of speakers would give us a better idea of like the general representation of our stakeholders. So I think that it's important to recognize the strengths of randomization for our public comment. I hope I stated that clearly enough.
Yes, thank you. Again, what I would like to weigh on with all of the valid concerns about giving voice to our constituents, which are, students and parents. The equalizer is that the public comment email is available to everyone at any time, even afternoon on the board meeting dates. I've gotten, in fact, today I got some after 3 o'clock that I check because I read all of them. And so to the public and to those out there, be comfortable with getting those in writing comments to us at any time through that process, because I believe that all of us are reading all of them. And so the voices are being heard. And the process that we're setting up, I think, would be equitable, again, to everyone that wants to do an in-person contact. Are we ready for the vote? Is everyone clear on what we're voting on? Okay, all those in favor, we need to do this by individual votes because the last vote was not unanimous. I'm
Okay,
sorry,
so
Kelly.
I'm going to jump in here and I guess ask for a restating of the motion because I now am not clear, sorry, how we are doing the prioritization, if it is completely random or if it is random and then 2 per group.
The way I originally presented the clarification was it was random among the groups.
Erica, do you agree that that was the motion?
Yes, I have used categorization and randomization.
Yes, thank you. Okay, are we ready now for the vote? Ms. Dalby?
Dalby, aye.
Kaiser, aye.
Tennis, nay.
Lando, aye.
Robinson, aye. Motion passes 4-1. Thank you, Board. The next is an information-only item. We have workshop committees and liaisons of board member assignments, and you've all received a copy of those.
If I could jump in here and make a comment, and this is going to fall under the, you really can teach an old dog new tricks. I had a question from a board member and, trying to understand the definition of committees. And in reviewing this, the comment was made, rightfully so, that usually when you have a committee, you have an outcome, you have a goal you're trying to achieve. And in looking at this, really what our goal is here is for board members to help staff develop the agenda for board meetings so that we are meeting your needs in that presentation. There are not actions, there are not goals. So I went back and made changes to the definition and called it really what it is. Board liaisons for our Chico Unified School District board workshops and board agenda items. And I think that helped clarify that, because there is a difference between when you have a committee that you want to go and achieve something. So I thank you for the conversation. It really got me thinking that we can clarify what things are. So you will see some minor revisions in here. It has no impact on who is assigned to what, but I just wanted to explain why I had changed the language on that. And keep those questions coming, keep me on my toes, and keep me thinking. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Superintendent. Do I have we don't need a motion because it's not an action item, so we are just accepting the list. Thank you. On number 4, item number 4 is the first reading of revised, updated new board policies. What we get in part of our services through California School Boards Association is we get policy recommendations for updating our board policies to be in compliance with recent legislation or precedent-setting court cases, things that CSBA, and we have, I believe there are 8 attorneys on our policy board with CSBA, so they review and make suggestions for the language for what we are about to adopt. The process involves 2 readings. This is the first reading, which means you now have them all, because I think they just came 2 days ago. And between now and, will they be at the February 3rd meeting? They'll be at the February 3rd workshop. Review them. If you have questions, send the questions forward to Superintendent Staley, so that if we need to get further clarification from our CSBA legal department as to why the language is the way it is, that we have time to get that. If you have any proposed changes, you can also get those to Superintendent Staley so that we can again review any proposed changes with legal, so we know that what we are considering in change is legal. And we can always add 2 things to clarify for us that doesn't make a substantive change in the policies. So we do consider those occasionally. So get to these quickly and then be prepared to adopt or question before the next board meeting. And we need to get the any of the language changes or anything to the superintendent's office so that they can be processed for inclusion in the agenda by Wednesday before the meeting, right?
As long as we have them by February 1st, that Monday, we can get that information posted out to the board, suggested changes. We wouldn't necessarily include it as part of the agenda.
Right, it's an attachment. Okay, everybody clear? All right, thank you. Educational services, Mr. Marchand?
Thank you, Madam President. We're here to give you an update since our last board meeting, and some of these updates educational services will be giving you on is our COVID update, our surveillance testing, update or professional development. It seems like forever since we had our board meeting, our last one, but we did approve 3 days of professional development, and we're going to want to go over what our secondary and our elementary went over, what did on those days. Also, we're going to be going over a and extracurricular activities that what we're trying to get through at this point. Instructional model enrollment. So we're going to be going over the data which shows what our kids are going online versus in person. And then some learning loss information. We're going to kind of go over some data that we can have on our learning loss during this time. So at this point, we're going to have Tina Keene talk about our COVID-19 and reopening schools update. And Ms. Keene, at this time also, could you also introduce who we have online and out there so people know that who they can direct their questions towards? That'd be great.
Yeah, absolutely. Good evening. I am also here with my partner, Diane Olson, with COVID. She is helpful in this as well with all of our nursing staff. We do have on the line about 4 people that I'm really thrilled that are here. Michelle Neves-Dean is one of our Chico Unified School nurses. Danette York from Butte County Public Health. Monica Soderstrom, also from Butte County Public Health, and Dr. Linda Lewis as well are all joining us tonight. So I appreciate, and I think we can all extend our appreciation as well for their time on this evening to be with us. We are still keeping up on our dashboard. John Vincent, could you click on that for me?
We need you to click. Can you click on the link, John?
Or on the bottom there.
There we go.
So like I said, we are keeping up our work on the dashboard. It has continued to it's continued to shift in how we're going to be mirroring the 2-week time frame. And we'll show you our draft of that. It's almost ready to pull out here and put on our website. It would be a replacement for this one. I've said before many times, and I'll say again, as I always say, this is a new language that we're teaching everybody with COVID. Our dashboard in this form takes the cumulative view at first glance. So if you keep scrolling down, you see a cumulative number at the bottom. And also as well, I always like to point out the blue tabs there on the bottom do indicate the weekly numbers of staff and students. So we are shifting it a bit to reflect the 2-week, 14-day number count that the county goes by as well, and you will see that ready to be unveiled. In fact, we can show you the draft of it. I think John Vincent and Erica have had that set up there as well. It's very similar. It doesn't look completely different, but it just gives the 2-week indications here. There we go. Thank you. You'll notice that we have the week of 111 and this week 118 on there, and that will shift every week. It will just shift to a new week, of course. And if we scroll down a bit, please, we did change the combined students and staff. We did want to indicate how many are in person on the site. We do know that one difference between this dashboard and the last one was we took the cumulative enrollment of the site. This does indicate the actual number of students that are in person learning as well. So the number is a little bit lower than on the other dashboard, but is very accurate. And every Monday we do get an update on the number of students that are in person learning, because we do know that that number does fluctuate a bit and we want to keep that updated. But you'll see there that the numbers are mirroring the 2 weeks. Any questions on the dashboard before I move on? We hope that it's pretty clear. We hope that as we roll out the new one, if any questions come up or ideas of things we need to finesse or refine, we are certainly open to that, as we've been this entire time. We do want it to be as representative for everybody easily to see as possible. Yes?
Ms. Keene, can you reiterate what is the total 2-week percentage of site population figure?
So that takes the 2 weeks that would be together and take the total number of the cases with the number of the students that are on site and staff, and that's your percentage there.
So this is the percent of both students and teachers.
Right, so if you scroll up a bit, you can see that's per site. The bottom there is the cumulative.
Over a 2-week period, this is the percentage of people who have had a positive COVID case over all the students and staff for all of Chico Unified in a 2-week period?
Yes, the cases that are reported to us all go on the dashboard, the confirmed cases, and those are what's indicated, yes.
Okay, so that's 0.29% of all the people involved in Chico Unified have COVID-19 over this 2-week period.
According to the
So-
confirmations that have come to us, yes.
Just shy of 0.3%. Okay,
Correct.
thank you.
You're welcome. Okay. We also, there on the bottom, you can see the weekly tally. We'll keep those throughout, much like the other part, the other dashboard section that had time frames. We will be able to see that too. Those are important to keep because we do need to know down the way, as looking back, if, you know, certain times were higher or lower or things like that. We do report now with, as of January 1st, there was a new law that went into effect for 3 cases or more. It's a business law. Well, I don't know if that's the right term for it, but all businesses have to adhere to it as well. Of 3 or more cases in 14 days of adults is how I understand. We report to the county on that in a workplace. So we have not had that yet, but this does help us keep watch of that. Yes?
Tina, I've had different emails from people, and they're very concerned about the fact that we don't, at least on the dashboard anyway, track people that are quarantining. So is there any, I don't know if we even can control that data very realistically, but is there any value to having that aspect as well, which is, you know, sort of the bubble around the incident?
So that has been a big question. Quarantining has been a big piece to tackle with this whole COVID-19 pandemic, and I think all of the nurses would agree. Absolutely. This came up at the last meeting, I know, and I did talk to Monica Soderstrom quite extensively about the quarantine and trying to wrap myself and my head around how do we do this? How do we show this? Is it in a meeting as a update every time at a meeting? Is it on a dashboard? And Monica, are you out there online with us?
Yes, I am. Hi, Tina.
Hi there. Would you kind of give us some details from your expertise on the quarantine from our conversation about why it's probably not the best place to go for quarantine on the dashboard?
What's difficult is really to capture at any given time how many people you have in quarantine, because some people may be in quarantine due to an on-site school exposure, where some people may be in quarantine because of an exposure they had off-site, like in their home, in their community. And the school nurses are tasked with monitoring those cases that are identified on campus and reporting those contacts that are identified related to that on-campus case. When it comes to people that are in quarantine outside of that, it gets a little more difficult for the school nurses and other school staff people to identify if someone is in quarantine because of an exposure or because maybe they have some symptoms and the parents are simply following the instructions to keep them home because they're symptomatic. Or maybe they're keeping them home because they're ill, not sure if it's related to COVID or not. So the numbers start getting a little blurred when you're looking at people staying home because they're ill versus people staying home because they're in quarantine. So trying to capture all of that into a dashboard would be
probably very time consuming for the school district and the staff, where that time might be better spent actually doing the work that needs to be done to ensure that all of the mitigation measures are being put in place.
Tina? So maybe, and I recognize what that, I mean, I was getting asked the questions, I wasn't seeing it. Maybe the framework would be to just go back to our assurance that anybody who's in quarantine is getting their educational material presented to them while they're quarantining, correct? I think that's our response as an institution.
Absolutely. The schools are making sure that students in quarantine are getting what they need. And, you know, staff in quarantine as well. If they are feeling well, they are still providing instruction. And we've been very open and creative with staff to work with them to make sure that that happens and we can support them in that. Because it's tricky. You know, it's hard to be in quarantine. You know, people want to be doing their work, but they know it's the right thing to do. So if we can help them with that, we certainly will. I did pull my part of the quarantine, and I kind of work in tandem with Tim on this. I work with HR to track our staff quarantines, and Tim really takes care of the data for students. So two different things, of course, but I do keep a weekly tally of quarantine with our Alina, who is our person in human resources that's working on this with me. And if it's kind of up to the will of the board if you would like me to bring the weekly numbers of quarantine to board meetings, or if you want to know them at all, I can certainly do that. I just need your direction on what you would like to see with that, if you want an update, much like Tim's, the enrollment update numbers that come, or things like that. Tim, do you want to talk about students? Sure.
I have a quarantine question also. Tina, one last quarantine question. And maybe we could kick this off to Danette York or Monica. But we had a public commenter, a couple of them actually, earlier tonight, Spanish-speaking people. They thought that we should open schools because the extra childcare that they're dealing with is causing them to have to scale back the hours that they work. What happens, and do you have a sense of how many people are being affected by these quarantines? Do we know whether, you know, working class families, for instance, how they are able to cope with quarantines if their children get a quarantine? That is a high level question, and I know that a firm answer might be hard to come by, but Danette York, do you have any thoughts or reaction to that, how these quarantines might be affecting people?
Hi, this is Danette. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, so you're right. To get a firm answer would be very difficult for that question, but I can tell you that we too, and many other organizations, have heard concerns from families that are affected by quarantine. It's a hardship on everyone involved, but it also is the only way to prevent the illness from being spread. So people do comply and they find ways around it, but yes, it is a hardship.
Thank you.
Tim or Diane?
So just to talk to the topic of monitoring student quarantine data, we did start a week before winter break with 2 new attendance codes that were meant to address, better address the keeping track of quarantines. That being said, they are new codes. They are the 5th and 6th new attendance codes we've added throughout this year. At my first look at the data last week, I was not confident that I had data that was, I like to say, clean enough to report out publicly, due to the fact that it's new codes and due to the partially to what Monica referred to as, we have kids reporting in sick that may be quarantining. We have kids staying home for various reasons that we may not know they're in quarantine. We have office staffs and teachers that were hesitant for also the reasons Monica said, that are under a tremendous amount of stress, and to put new codes, and that's a lot of extra work for teachers and for our office staffs. They're already under a tremendous increase in their workload, and they're doing their very best. But when I look at the numbers that Tina shares and the quarantine numbers that we have for our students, I think that we're I'm probably getting an under-reporting. So, and that's why I did not include that in the board presentation today. Any questions about that?
I have a question, and it's actually for any of you. I think that the value in knowing the level of disruptions that quarantine is causing is probably what we all are thinking about. You know, I think that we do want to brainstorm how to best capture in some kind of metric how much of an effect on continuity of learning for staff providing education and for students to attend school or going back and forth. Like, what's the level of disruption happening at while we're here in the purple tier and open halftime, So I think that it would be good for us to try to wrap our heads around that efficient way to have a metric, to know what's the level of disruption this is causing. I know that's why we're having this conversation, and I appreciate just the recognition that the data is too new to even really dive into it. But I just wanted to put that on record, that I think that it would be valuable to know the level of disruption that quarantines are causing. So.
Madam President, we do have a raised hand on Zoom. From Linda?
From Linda? Yes, Linda, are you available? Your comment?
Yes, thank you. I just had something I thought I could add that might be useful to you all. In our data, we know that the schools, when there is a case, there are up to 23 people quarantined due to that case. So for each case you may have quite a few others who are pulled out of school.
Dr. Lewis, while you're on there with us, I know you did supply us with a couple of slides that you wanted to share tonight, and we just pulled them up. So while we have you, do you want to go and tell us a little bit about these slides?
Sure. Yeah. So there's a lot of questions about, do kids get COVID? Do they transmit COVID? And we're still learning a lot about this virus. But what I did is I pulled our data from the time when we really had COVID starting in our community up until basically the end of 2020, and looked at the rates of the numbers and the rates of COVID cases and these are reported cases in our youth. And so what you see in this graph is just the raw number of cases, and the age groupings are based on what I could pull as a denominator from Kids Count data for our county. So it's 0 to 4, basically our preschoolers in the green line, and not surprisingly, they're the lowest number of cases, but you do see a general trend upward. Schools opened around October 19th, as I recall, and then we had Halloween get-togethers, and then we had Thanksgiving get-togethers, and then we had Christmas. And you can see the effect of that in these graphs. The red line is the 14 to 17-year-olds, And that's a smaller age grouping than the 5 to 13-year-olds. So I have a second slide that shows rates that'll put it in a little better perspective. Okay, if we could go back to the first one. I just want to highlight. And then the purple line is your 5 to 13-year-olds. And then next slide, please. And this is based on cases per 100,000. So we essentially corrected for the different age groupings. They're having different numbers of children. So again, you can see the 0 to 4-year-olds, although they remain low, they're creeping up at the same time that our community COVID is going up. Same with our 5 to 13-year-olds, and our teenagers are highest on a case rate, which is consistent with state and national literature, that teenagers are more likely to become infected and more likely to be ill. We do know from literature and from other countries, from different schools in this country, that, and I think your numbers demonstrate that you've been doing a good job of containing COVID within the schools based on the measures that you've been taking. And we know those things help prevent the spread, and I want to congratulate you that you've been doing a really good job. I think there's danger in letting go of that too quickly and having a rebound effect or increased spread.
Thank you, Dr. Lewis.
Can I ask I'm so sorry.
Dr. Kaiser?
I was just going to give a family history example of how I think varied Tim's struggling with the quarantine numbers. So I'm the oldest of 6. So I get the mumps. I am really, really, really sick. And out the window, I can hear my 3 youngest brothers playing in the backyard. They had the mumps too. But it made no difference because they were, just kept home from school. So I think even if we know quarantine numbers exactly, we're not going to know really how those different kids are responding. I was pissed at my brothers.
Caitlin?
Thanks. First, I'd like to just raise a quick point of privilege and just, can we keep our masks on over our faces even when we're talking, just so that we're all on the same page there. While we're on the line still, you kind of alluded to it at the end. Were we speaking to Linda? Okay, thanks. That rushing things or letting go of our current precautions, maybe is a better way to say it. If we were to open full time, especially at the secondary level, looking at the rise in numbers and the number of quarantines that take place when there is an exposure in school. So if there's a student in first period who tests positive tomorrow or yesterday, that student has exposed 28 students in each class. Is that generally, in each classroom that they're in, or is it, because that would be different than at the primary level, right? Because they're sitting near, or is it in total? And so my point is if they were going to be going through 6 classes a day instead of 3 classes a day, wouldn't that number double? Is essentially my point of question.
So the numbers would still, they would go up. I can't say for sure that they would double because we still have that 6-foot parameter. And so right now, students are being quarantined within 6 feet, and we're doing a really good job in most of our classes of keeping that 6-foot parameter. If we bring more students in, then you will have more students within that 6-foot parameter. The one thing we're still trying to get a clarification on is that with some of the governor's new guidance, there is a mention of reducing to 4-foot parameter. What we don't know is if with reducing that 4-foot parameter, they're saying contact tracing starts at 4 foot. Right now, we're interpreting that contact tracing would still be within 6 foot, even though it would go down to 4 foot. So yes, it would go up. To say that it would be a whole class quarantined, that's not necessarily accurate.
Yeah, okay, I understand that now. I think too, I'm worried about the disruption and the quarantines and like there being like a huge boom in the number of kids who have to get sent home because of an one student exposure. So I just want us to kind of take that into consideration and continue hearing the data. It's really helpful. Thank you for that. Oh, and also just, not all of our classes are 6 foot distance. The students are within, some of them are within 3 feet, I think is my understanding.
Our principals are trying really hard to make sure
Yeah.
it's that 6 foot parameter. Some of them have gone through the rulers
Yeah.
and tape measures and just putting them out and everything. Today I've been in classrooms that they had the tape drawn on, the chairs in there. So we're doing the best. I can't guarantee that everyone's able to maintain 6 feet.
Right, and that's an
But-
equitable thing, right?
Yeah.
There's some classrooms that are just smaller and have students closer together than others, and that's a whole other variable.
I'm going to say a good majority are at that level, and that's why our quarantine numbers are where they're at.
Mhm.
We don't have full classes being quarantined, except for in special ed, where we have those students that have hands-on.
Mhm. But if we have more students in the class, that's less foot of distancing.
Right.
And if we have full day versus a half day, that's more, especially at the secondary level where they're rotating classes, it's more numbers of possible exposures outside of it, as opposed to at the primary level where they're with the same group of kids all day. That's just that many more.
Secondaries innately, because of their schedule,
Mhm.
has more exposure.
Exactly, yeah. And they breathe and talk a lot more than the poor little kids.
Thank you, Madam President. Dr. Linda Lewis, are you there?
I am here.
Super. This is your chart that we're looking at, correct?
Yeah, this is
Right.
Butte County data.
Okay, and the most recent date that I see on the right-hand side is January 2nd. Is that right?
That is correct. I just went through basically the end of 2020.
So I'm looking right now at the Butte County dashboard of new versus total confirmed cases by day, and I see just in since that time, we've gone to, I'm just shooting from the hip here, maybe 35% of the cases that we had at that time. So the trend line in the total confirmed cases seems to be low. Am I reading that incorrectly? Lower?
So you are correct in that we appear to be trending down over the last week, but it's really soon to say that. I'm hoping that coming up, we're finally getting over the holiday transmissions that occurred, but we are still at a very high rate. So we have a ways to come down. Hopefully that trend will continue.
So approximately the cases, so if I'm looking at the right-hand side of your chart, it looks like, say for example, the 14 to 17-year-olds, there's 50 some odd cases just for that age group. Is that correct? Is that the data that's on your chart?
The chart that's up right now is a case rate, but the youth are affected a little bit differently than other communities. So I would not feel comfortable extrapolating from our overall population to what's going on in our youth. And I would be happy to take another look at these, but the school was out over the holidays. And so, it'll be, I don't know, maybe another 2 weeks, we can really get a feel for what's going on in January.
Okay, I just don't want the board to have the wrong impression of where we are right now in the trend line. And looking at the new versus total probable cases by day, it is sharply lower. If your data was current on this chart, we would see the trend line leading down, whereas what we're looking at shows it going up. And I guess I want to point out and maybe complain about the fact that that the right-hand side of the chart is January 2nd.
Okay, thank you.
Ms. Dalby?
Just one more question on that. Is there a lag at all? So if we're looking at, the trend going up, sorry, I don't have my glasses on. 11/7, 10/31. Is that like real time, or is that kind of like a 1 or 2 week lag of possible exposure? Would this?
So it would depend on what, there isn't much of a lag anymore in the time that a person is tested to the time we get the results. So that's probably 2 to 3 days, sometimes same day. There is a lag from the time a person becomes ill typically until they get tested. And there's an up to 2 week lag from the time they're exposed until the time that they can become symptomatic.
So then the data that we're not seeing right now from the last 2 weeks is would it be up to 2 weeks, which would be like the beginning of Christmas break essentially, or or winter break, sorry, or just having a little bit of a lag. I just want to make sure that we're understanding the trends of the data and what those trends are, if they're real time or if there's a little bit of lag involved. So if we see an uptick or a downtick, it's not representing that day particularly, but maybe more of exposures that happened 1 to 2 weeks prior.
That is correct. And you can see how in the data after school opening, it's about 2 weeks when, and not saying that it's happening at the schools, but with school opening, we saw more mixing of people in the community as well. So you see it starts to go up and then it bumps up again after Halloween, which was the time when people really gathered, and again after Thanksgiving and Christmas. So I think we are on a downward trend, but we're starting that trend at a very high rate. So we have a ways further to go down, and I'm more than happy to present these trend lines again at future meetings.
Mr. Dennis, did you have another question?
I know we have a lot to go over still, so I don't want to use too much time, but how will vaccines affect this trend line?
Well, we all hope that it will help knock this trend line down tremendously. There are a lot of unknowns. This is a new virus. So we know that the vaccine keeps people from becoming ill. We hope it also prevents them from becoming infected and transmitting, but we don't have that data yet. We also have developing, you all probably have heard on the news that there have been several variants that have emerged. And some of these are of concern because they're much more highly transmissible. And so we're keeping a very close eye on those. There's one that was just discovered, as it's now comprises almost a quarter of the circulating virus in some counties. And so, I think we have to keep assessing the situation and respond based on our current knowledge of the vaccine and its efficacy and how many people we can get vaccinated, and also what is happening with the virus itself. But hopefully as we roll out more vaccine, and we're getting that out there as quickly as we can, we will have people who are immune. We're focusing on vaccinating teachers to reduce their risk. So hopefully that will help us open things back up.
Okay, this is an information-only item. Board members, you feel that you've reached the end of tonight's questions. By tomorrow morning, you'll have more, trust me. Yes, Mr. Landau?
Sorry, I'll be very brief. I just wanted to address the sample dashboard that you presented us with, Ms. Keene. I was going to ask for potentially two things to look at possibly changing. One is that at the end of each week, I would love to see a third column that simply quickly showed the change week to week over the previous week, so that we could just see a trend line ourselves. And secondly, currently you are adding new data on at the right side, and I will understand that's easier in terms of, constructing it. If we could get those reversed so the new one's coming on the left side, then you wouldn't have to scroll over a whole bunch of ways, and the current data would be right there. Is it?
On the, just to clarify, on the main
Sorry,
interface?
on the weekly tally breakdown.
On the weekly tally?
Because as you're going, you'll have to end up scrolling a bunch to the right in order to see the most current data.
So can you click on that, John Vincent, on the January weekly tally breakdown? Just so I can, here, it's on the bottom there.
And if it's okay, I'm just going to jump in there real quick. So keep in mind that this is a draft. When it is posted to the website, it follows the same format as the current dashboard. So it will display in its full form if you're viewing it on a full screen. So the scrolling and those type of things are due to the fact that it's in draft form in a full Excel spreadsheet and not formatted for the website like it currently is on the current dashboard. And the reason why we kept everything was the same was to help limit confusion with the public. We were trying to carry over a dashboard that could be comparable from the 2020 information to the 2021 information while still pulling out that 2-week snapshot without having too much information where community members who are used to the explanations that we've already developed for the 2020 dashboard. So just to clarify a couple of those points.
Thank you, Erica.
She's our
Okay, board, if,
webmaster designer.
At this point, I believe then we'll move on to the public hearing discussion on the special education extended school year modified schedule.
So,
Ms. Olson?
Excuse me, Madam President, I just want to know, did you want us to end our presentation, because we did have 5 other slides. That was slide number 1. But we can clearly, it's just all informational, and you have that information for yourself. And if you wanted to email us with questions off that information, we clearly can do that, and we can move on to the next one per the time that we have already used for our presentation. That's up to you guys.
Mr. Marchand, thank you for that clarification. The presentation slides are on our agenda. Okay, board members, then I would encourage you to review those unless you want to go through them tonight.
I'm, this being only my second meeting, I'm a little disoriented in terms of what it is that we're skipping and not going to have an opportunity to comment on.
Okay, so the next.
So I mean, even if I could just see which slides.
Sure, the next slide will be the surveillance testing update that Mr. Hanlon was going to give. Then the next slides after that, we're going to be on the professional development that we provided over those 3 days. And then the final slides will be on instructional model enrollment, so how many kids are online versus in person, and also our learning loss slide. So that's basically the F data that was requested from us. So those are all on there.
I think that we should talk about the F data, because we're all ruminating about the impact that our schedule is having, and I think that that's something that we need to know. If we've got a big explosion of Fs in the district, and I think that we do, having reviewed that material a little bit, I'd like to talk about that, or be informed of what it is that we're looking at.
Yeah, that chart was available for us, and I agree, it's a valuable.
So, Mr. Karras, if you're available to go over the chart, that'd be great.
Sure.
Thanks.
Sure, yeah. What you're looking at right here is data from the past 4 years for our kindergarten through 2nd graders. And this data is just one data point in our assessment plan, but it's a very important one. It's the basic phonics skills test, which tests phonics skills at the primary level. And so each one of those columns, the light blue columns is over the past, is a year. So the first 4 columns are kindergarten, next 4 are 1st grade, the next 4 are 2nd grade. You'll note that the kindergarten columns do not have a dark blue baseline indicator due to the fact that we don't have an expectation for kindergartners when they first come to kindergarten in August. You'll see on this first and second grade that we do have a baseline, the dark blue bar in the middle of the light blue. And so it's very easy to tell by looking at this, the growth levels from baseline to the first trimester at the end of October over the years. Across the board, we see significantly lower achievement than the previous year. And in the case of first grade and actually second grade to a lesser degree, we see less growth between baseline and trimester 1 tests.
Question, if you don't mind. Baseline, is this the same student's previous year's score, or is this some determine what the kind of growth we'd like to see?
That's a good question. This is students at benchmark, and these are not cohorts. This is the 2019-20 kindergartners are obviously different than the 2021, and we can't say for sure that all those 19-20 kindergartners are in our seats in 2021. So this is just a non-cohort look at things. Next slide, please. This is a different assessment given at both baseline and Tri-1 for our 3rd, 4th, and 5th graders. The graphics mean the same thing. So the dark blue is baseline and the lighter blue is trimester 1. And in all cases, we see a drop from the previous year. And this is star reading, given it gives us an independent reading level. And we've been leaning on this assessment for years. Next slide. Okay, this slide breaks down our percentage of students receiving at least one failing grade at the junior high and high school levels with alternative education excluded. The reason for the exclusion of alternative education is because the difference in grading periods and the way grades are reported. The bars are similar in construction to the previous slides, where the dark blue in the middle is last year in this case, and the green on the outside is this year. So we can see that last year for the fall semester, we had 9.7% of students receiving at least one failing grade, and that's gone up to over 23% for all students. You can also see the breakdown by our student groups.
English learners, do we have any insight as to why that group has been hit so hard?
The English learners obviously face challenges regarding English, and that's the most likely reason why.
I have to wonder, based on the public testimony we had earlier tonight, if parents being engaged in work activities might prevent them from overseeing their children's education at home to the extent that to a greater extent.
Yeah, when we look at socially economically disadvantaged further on down the chart, we see also a significant difference between the 2 years.
We were recently in a CSBA, it was a Butte County informational gathering. I want to, not everyone was able to attend, I don't think, but one of the speakers that we heard from in that Butte County informational, conference that we participated in, was we heard an expert make the point that the COVID pandemic has negatively affected wealthy people in society, not very much. But especially in terms of economically, income for that group is not down sharply. But if you go to the lower earners and their families, those people are very, very heavily impacted. And so I think that we should be sensitive to that as a body that's making decisions that really affect those people who have nowhere else to go. Their kids have nowhere else to go but Chico Unified School District. We need to be mindful of that responsibility that we have to those people, I think. And we're seeing the effects of our decisions, the effect that they can have on those kids' education.
Okay, this next slide indicates the percent of all grades given that were Fs. Same group of kids, our junior high and high school students. And we see the all students student group go up almost 4 times from fall of 2019. And you can see the student groups below how they've changed since last year.
If there's no more questions for those slides, I would love for Mr. Shepherd to go over the co and extracurricular activity slide. We think it's important to give the board an update and information on what's going on with that, if we can, please, so there's no surprises. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Marchand. We just wanted to highlight, we know that we have, under our multi-tiered system of support, we have 3 basically buckets. We have academic achievement, we have social emotional learning, and we have how we're going to handle behavior. And one of the certainties is that our students' holistic well-being is important, and we know that our co and extracurricular activities, not just secondary, TK-12, are vital. So I just want to highlight really quickly that we are thankful to be outside the regional stay-at-home order. So we do have kids who are back skill building and conditioning. We just had a meeting today, with CIF meeting today, that has provided us a significant amount of flexibility. And basically, our athletics, our extracurricular activities will be tied directly to the tiered system. Previously, we were tethered to seasons of sport and playoffs for understandable reasons, mainly financial. Now we have an opportunity to provide these athletic opportunities to our kids. And it's not just the student athletes. Finally, I just want to reinforce that the significance of this development is we have so many kids that are tied to the culture of their school. They want to attend events. They want to support their friends. And there are so many ramifications of this untethering from a season of sport and tying ourselves to a flexible schedule that's directly related to our colors. So we're going to be working with Butte County Public Health to support our kids as we explore these extracurricular opportunities.
And I did just want to point out there that it was a pretty impressive list of virtual clubs that have been going on. So those opportunities to allow our students, even in the more severe restrictions, to have social opportunities. I'm really impressed with our high schools for doing that.
And these are, thank you, Superintendent Staley, these are just examples.
I have a comment. Thank you, Mr. Shepherd, for that report. And some of you may have seen some news coverage that came out about, I think 5 or 6 days ago. There was a group of families, students, and parents who gathered outside this building, actually, to sort of send a message to the community that they're very eager for their kids to get back into sports. And I just want to acknowledge those people, and I think it's the Let Them Play movement. And I appreciated what they have to say, and I think there's great value in getting kids together for things like what they're advocating for and what you're describing, Mr. Shepherd.
I have a quick question,
Miss-
sorry.
Question, Kate?
Yeah. Was there, in that meeting with CIF, was there a discussion about that in the tier system with crowds too, like allowing spectators and all of that?
Yeah, they have a whole set of expectations that have been the result of conversations between the CIF and the California Department of Public Health. So they have very specific expectations based on some experiential outcomes from other states. So it's too soon to tell what's going to be allowed and what's not going to be allowed. But
And am I under the right impression that we're likely going to be following CIF guidelines to make sure that we're within the scope of their regulations?
What's interesting to us is it's more following the California Department of Public Health guidelines. CIF is involved in the eligibility and the playoff structure, but because we're not going to be competing in playoffs, the only jurisdiction really now for CIF is eligibility. California Department of Public Health and Butte County Public Health will be working with us on all the expectations. Yep.
Thank you. Mr. Marchand, you're,
At this time, if there's any more questions on the slides, we are done with our presentation.
okay. Were there any more questions?
And before you move on, I would like to thank our friends out at Butte County Public Health for joining us again, and Michelle Neves-Dean. So we thank you, ladies, once again for giving up some time tonight to join us with your expertise. Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, now then the public hearing on special education extended school year modified. Ms. Olson?
Hi, thank you. This is to discuss
One
the
comment.
waiver application that we have put in, that we will be putting into the state of California to change our extended school year services for students with special education. This is part of the IEP process. And so our principal for the extended school year is Dana Feingold, so I'm going to have her talk about the changes from what we're asking from was regularly offered to the change that we're going to be making.
Thank you. What we are proposing for ESY this year is to do 3 weeks with our students, 5 hours a day. In the past, we have done this program for the last 4 years. Before that, we did have our students come for 4 weeks, and we did 4 hours a day. So the hours are not changing for students. It's just the amount of time they are in our classrooms, going from 4 weeks to 3 weeks.
Thank you. Ms. Guy?
Yes.
So since we've got a 4-year data set, I know that the discussion, the written discussion was about the saving of money and time, but how did the students' performances change with a more concentrated framework?
Okay, on ESY is different from summer school. ESY is a part of the offer of free and appropriate public education for maintenance of skills.
Oh, okay.
In other words, we are looking at making sure that they have more time during the summer to practice the skills they've learned during the year and maintain those skills so there's not as much regression. So a data point of growth wouldn't be appropriate for ESY. It's more of looking at the regression that they have when they come back to school and how long it takes them to improve. Because these are typically students with moderate severe disabilities, for the most part, that is the way we judge whether they're eligible and then determine which goals to work on that they stand the most chance of losing skills on.
Well, I would rephrase that then, how we just saw a learning loss for, so is there learning loss based on your 4 years' experience being mitigated, notably?
So the learning loss is, in my opinion, because I've been in many counties now that have done this move to the 3 years, the longer day and having the consistent staff actually does help the students. When you go to 4 weeks, we tend to have a teacher for the first 2 weeks and then find another teacher for the second 2 weeks, and we use a lot more subs.
Yeah.
So the strength of the program is that, and so yes, we are seeing that they are able to retain skills and maintain skills through that period of time. And they start at the beginning of the year already familiar, like for 5th graders, they'll attend with their 6th grade teacher for the next year. So now they already know what it is to enter into that junior high environment or into that high school environment. So those are the strengths that happen, whether it's in 4-week increments. There is a slight increase in the number of hours the students get because in the 4-week model, we are closed for 4th of July. So it's really 19 days versus 15 days.
All right, good, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, I'm going to open the public hearing on this issue, and we do have a request for input on this item. Elaine Ward.
addressing the school board, okay? Okay, go ahead, Elaine.
Hi, my name is Elaine Ward. I have a son that is autistic and is part of special day class and general ed classroom at Little Chico Creek. I did have a question in regard to the ESY days. So the clarification that I did receive was that it is, they won't be losing any hours. And according to the agenda, it was for the fiscal implication was to be able to hire more special education teachers. Is that just for the ESY that we will be hiring these teachers? Is this going to be something permanent? Is this a one-time fix? Just kind of wanting more information of, I guess, what that fiscal responsibility we're hoping for in adjusting decreasing the number of days. Because I know since my son's been part of a student under Chico Unified, it seems that there has been a decrease in days since 2007 with the ESY days. So I'm just really curious, is this going to continue to happen, or is this hopefully just going to be a one-time fix and no more adjustments, if that makes sense? Sorry.
Yeah, so ESY, the way it's written in the ed code, is a 4-week program, 4 hours a day, with 1 day allowed for a holiday, so it's 19 days. We have, for the last 4 years, run the ESY program as a 3-week program, but extending the number of hours in a day, so it ends up gaining some hours. We anticipate that the 3-week program, because of being able to keep a stable staff and be able to have more of the teachers that teach during the year teach, that this is something that has provided positive benefits for allowing consistent instructional staff and not having to hire so many subs. That is the greatest advantage to this, is that stable supply of teachers for teaching the students. There wouldn't be an option for reducing any more the number of days, and we would not reduce the number of hours either. So it's either the 4 weeks or 3 days. There's some other adjustments you can use, but usually it's more along the lines of doing 2 weeks at the end of the school year and 2 weeks at the start of the school year, some other unique things. But the ed code lists it as 4 weeks, end of the year, and you have an option to do a waiver to 3 weeks, trying to mitigate the number of hours.
May I ask a question? I'm just trying to make sure I'm 100% understanding this. 15 days at 5 hours. The agenda we have says that's 80 hours of ESY instruction. Are we finding an, how does 15 times 5 equal 80? I believe most days it's 75.
It includes the lunch hour for the students as well.
So the in-class instruction portion is 75 hours? Thank you.
Any more input? Okay. Then I'll close the public hearing. Oh, we have another call?
No, we still have her on here. I didn't know if we.
Oh,
Yes.
Elaine, I'm sorry. Ms. Ward, are you still there with questions?
So, sorry, there's a delay between what I can actually hear. I just wanted, it seems there tends to be cuts sometimes of special education, and I want to put the friendly reminder out there that one of my parents in the support group that I'm in said is that our kids aren't money. So if there's a way that we can make sure we're not taking away from them and still giving them the most that they need, especially considering the regression that a lot of our students in these special day classes and students with special needs and disabilities have experienced this year, if we can continue to keep that in mind, that we want to make sure that we're not taking away from them when they need it the most.
And
Thank you.
just one clarification on that is that fiscally, there are no cuts to special education from one year to the next, because there is written into unless there's certain circumstances, what's called maintenance of effort. And that maintenance of effort says we have to maintain the same funding from one year to the next. And in fact, we have to increase it by at least $1 each year. So we don't do cuts to special ed unless there's a loss of students, or I think there's a budgetary caveat too. Kevin, you'd have to clarify that piece.
Yeah, the federal maintenance of effort actually is kind of a four-part test. For total expenditures, you can't spend less the next year than you did prior, but you can then also look at local and state contribution in totality and also per pupil. So there's kind of a four-part test to that maintenance of effort.
Thank you. Any more input, question? Ms.
I would-
Ward, thank you for calling in.
Yes, I would like to move the special ed extended school year modified schedule.
Is there a second to the motion?
Sure, I'll second that.
Thank you. I have a motion by Dr. Kaiser and a second by Mr. Landau to approve the ESY schedule. Okay, if there's no further discussion, all those in favor? Let's see, we need to do roll call. Ms. Dalby?
Dalby, aye.
Kaiser, aye.
Tennis, aye.
Lando, aye.
Robinson, aye. Thank you. Board, before we move on to business services, let's take a 10-minute break. No. That's why all the people were pointing at me. No, thank you, Board, for reminding me that I need to turn my mic on. And we are now at the business services point. We have Julie Kissel. Are you out there, Ms. Kissel?
I am. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Well, thank you. And thank you for a time with the board this evening. This item is to update the board on the district's progress toward adding shower facilities at Fairview High School as the board desires. Over the winter break, the facilities department met with the principal, Andrew Moll, and the director of secondary education, John Shepard, to gather information about what the school thought their needs were related to having shower facilities there at the school. So it was decided, there was a strong desire to create a private and comfortable in-home style restroom type of with a shower, and they would have liked it to be located in room 2, which is actually an old kindergarten building on the campus, and it also houses the laundry facilities for the school. So as you can see on the screen, there used to be side-by-side toilet rooms for kindergartners. And what we're doing, if you can slide to that next page, is we're combining the two into one room, adding a corner shower stall and a corner sink. So it'll be a private in-home style restroom facility. We were able to do the planning and get a contractor quote and get started right away. We expect this work to be completed this coming weekend. Does anyone have any questions?
Hip hooray.
Mr. Tennis?
I have some questions. Didn't we hear before the holidays that there is already a shower, and in fact, we made a point to turn it on or something like that? Am I not remembering that correctly?
No, Mr. Landau, I believe this was your inquiry. You want to?
I'm not sure what to say in response to Mr. Tennis's comment. I don't recall.
There's no facility like this in town?
In town or at Fairview High School?
At Fairview High School?
No.
No.
No shower at Fairview High School?
No.
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 Right. I think that this looks like a great addition to our district, especially at Fairview High School, and I commend Board Member Lando for bringing it forward, and I think that it sounds like a great idea, and the price tag seems, I mean, given what bathroom remodels cost nowadays, I think the price tag seems surprisingly kind of reasonable. So thank you, Mr. Lando, for bringing this forward. I make a motion that we approve this.
I second.
I think it's just informational, is my understanding. But I would like to make sure that the thank yous go to Julie and her team, who I was super impressed that you guys were able to get on this so quickly. I know it's very much appreciated by the staff out there, so thank you guys.
Yeah, thanks, Julie. It's super awesome and impressive, and I was so excited about hearing Breaking Ground, and it's just really exciting. I can't wait to see final pictures.
I can't wait
Thank
to
you.
use
We'll
it.
make sure you do.
Yeah, can we use that any time?
Sure.
The history of Fairview becoming Fairview, of course, having been on the school closure committee that created this mess, this was an elementary school before it became Fairview. And, our first problem was everything was at knee-high instead of waist-high for older kids. So that's the reason why the facility doesn't have this type of accommodation, because there were no PE classes or, anything like this when it was being used as J. Partridge Elementary School. And thank you, Julie.
You're very welcome.
Okay, the next report is the discussion action on the Charter School Measure K projects requests. Julie Kissel.
Yes, thank you. So our Charter Measure K committee has been active again. And this item is really just an accounting true-up. So there are 4 projects listed that they've turned in final accounting for. And most of them, 3 of them are credits, and 1 of them was overspent by a small amount. So there really is no added expenditure, but this is simply to go back and correct the final accounting for each of those projects in our books and make sure that Inspire's balance is accurate.
Thank you.
I move.
Thank you.
Yeah, I move passage of the Charter School Measure K project request, the account correction.
Is there a second?
I'd like to raise a point of order. Just to be consistent, we don't have public comment for this, right? And also, we didn't have any prompt for technical questions or clarification yet. So we should have our sponsor introduce the item. We ask technical questions for clarification, so we should have been asked if we have any questions for clarification. No public comment, and then you ask for a motion. And so we will give a motion once you ask for it. I'm looking at our rules of order here. We don't want to put a motion on the floor before we've all had a chance to speak to the item.
After a motion and a second have been asked for, I will ask for further comments or questions from the board. Caitlin, I'm sorry, I'm not following you.
So on our rules of order that we're working on, the procedure for agenda items, you announce the item, that's number 1.
Yes.
The sponsor introduces the item, which Julie just did. The board asks technical questions for clarification purposes, so that's where we would ask her questions. So you would prompt us to ask if we have questions, and then we would bring up our questions, or we would say we have no questions. And then we would say, now's the time for public comment, we have no speaker cards submitted. Then the chair asks for a motion, and then we make a motion. So that then, once you ask for a motion, then Dr. Kaiser would make her motion.
We don't have a speaker.
Don't have a speaker for this,
Yeah,
but this would be the steps that she's referencing.
okay. Yeah, I have the same. The reason why you're seeing question marks in my eyes is because I'm, in this part of the agenda, having a question other than a board member just doesn't happen by the time we get to this type of business on the board agenda. That's why it's put later in stuff. I do see the confusion between the proposed Rosenberg's rules and what our, just our customary practice has been, that these are board items that usually public doesn't have a question about. If there is an administrator with the school, with the charter school, they're usually present if they think there's going to be a question from a board member. So in order for us to be following what you're requesting, you are asking that before I call for a motion, would be public comment on the item. Since we are online rather than in public.
No, my point is just that we shouldn't be making a motion until the board has had a chance to ask if there are any questions. Just points of order, just.
Yeah, no,
boop, 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 boop.
I hear you.
And then you will invite a motion for the floor. We're not just gonna throw out motions willy-nilly.
Do you have a question?
I don't have a question, it's a point of order.
Right.
I do have a question. When do we get done with this point of order?
Thank you, Tom. What I think we need to do is have a discussion regarding whether or not we need to make some noted procedural notes in how we're going to follow this, because it is a deviation from years of how this part of the agenda has been handled by the board. If we need to do something different, I think we can easily have a two-person board member superintendent discussion and see if we can make some changes that make sense to you. Would that be okay?
That conversation is, up to you. I think my purpose of bringing this up is just for consistency on action items. So on action items, it seems like we should stay consistent, and once we get used to it, it'll just be boom, boom, boom. Like,
Right.
it won't be a big deal.
When-
It's like Mr. Orlando has a question, or has a question, but we skipped right over that and put a motion on the floor. So I want to make sure that we're all being heard, and get the information we have before a motion is put on the floor.
When we are in person, it has been the board's practice to ask if there are comments on the item from the people present at the meeting. Mr. Landau, do you?
I just think there's some confusion here, because I think that you're addressing step 4 on our list of public comments, and she's talking at this point about making sure we don't skip section 3, board asking technical questions, so we know exactly what we are talking about when we make a motion.
Right.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, that was my point of order. We just we skipped number 3, 4, and 5. You didn't even ask for a motion. We just went from 2 to making a motion. So that was my point of order.
I see what your concern is.
Okay. Because perhaps I wanted to make a motion. Who knows? But we should be waiting for
Yeah.
you to ask for a motion.
If I did not make asking the board if you had any other questions clear, that's my fault for not following. Point well taken. Let's get together and make sure that it's clear how we follow these parts of the agenda, because it does move fast. It moves very fast. And when we are in session with public, there's always a question of, are there any comments from visitors? So that part was not being done now because we don't have anything other than online
Yeah, I understand that. But we
participation.
also skipped over board questions and clarification, technical questions. And so I think we'd like to get back to that step of the life of a motion on this item, on this action item. Thank you.
Thank you, I hear you. Okay, now where we are back to,
Well, may I ask a
did
quick
we have a motion on?
May I ask a quick question?
Huh? Yes, I'm sorry,
Oh,
yes.
Thank you. And this really is quick, Julie. Are these appear to all be Inspire? Are they all at the current site, or are some of them involving the planning, or both? What's the split there?
All but one are at their current site, but they're all equipment or materials. Only one is for planning funds, and that is for the Canyon View site. And it all results in a net credit back to Inspire of $8,000 in change.
Thank you.
Okay. Any further questions of clarification on the item and the motion?
Please repeat the motion.
I move to, I'm sorry, go ahead.
You don't have your mic on? Okay.
Board Kaiser move passage of the Charter School Measure K account corrections.
Okay, is there a second?
I'll second that, yes.
Any further questions? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Motion carries 5-0. Okay. Item number 3, under Business Services, is the boundary modification. Julie Kissel.
Yes, so in the North Chico area, we have a new development called Meadowbrook Ranch that is currently being constructed. And this is making it necessary to modify our boundary, our school boundary in that area. I'm going to ask John Vincent to pull up the previously published boundary. As you can see between the green and the purple there, that's showing you the division between Emma Wilson and Shasta, and it is also the division between Chico Junior and Bidwell, and Chico High and Pleasant Valley High. This boundary was drawn and approved by the board before the development started and was constructed. So as you can see, that linear line going through that neighborhood is not very useful for creating a good neighborhood boundary there. So that is why we wanted to make a minor modification. We developed a group to talk about the different options with redrawing this minor boundary change. And I walked you through them in the lead sheet with diagrams. I'm going to jump to the option number 4, if you wouldn't mind, John, to show you the proposed boundary that we have come up with. It does look a little bit odd, but if you were a potential homeowner and a parent who wanted to find out what school your child's boundary would be if you owned a home in this area, you would enter in an address, and then it would tell you which school that home falls in. You wouldn't necessarily look at this map to determine which boundary you fall in. And we wanted to bring more students into the Emma Wilson boundary instead of into the Shasta boundary, because Shasta, as you may know, has historically been a really impacted campus. We have recently finished a master plan project there that added capacity, but we also know that a lot more development is going to be occurring in these open purple areas in the Shasta boundary. So in this proposed boundary adjustment, you will see that Hayfork Creek, which is the street right on the northern edge of the green boundary, all of the homes that would face Hayfork Creek Street would go to the Emma Wilson School, Chico Junior, and Chico High. And then all of the other streets to the north in this area would go to Shasta and Bidwell and Pleasant Valley High School, as shown in the purple. So this is a small boundary adjustment. I will open it up for questions, and we certainly can walk through the other options if it's the desire of the board to do so.
Ms. Dalby?
Thank you. I have 2 questions. First is, do we know when future development will take place beyond that Hayfork Creek Road onto the next road before Eel River? I mean, do we already know like the phases of that development over there?
You know, we don't know. We are notified when projects are approved, when they get their permit to develop, but the developers, really, it's at their discretion when they start to build certain areas based on how much business they're doing, how many properties they're selling. So we do from time to time get updates from the city and the county on the developments, but they don't have to notify us when they're opening up a new section for development.
Are these already built?
Yes, some of them are built, yes.
Okay. And then my last question is why the breaking up of like just neighbors between schools, I would think that it would be more effective just to make the boundary that street beyond Hayfork Creek and include all of that new development area into Emma Wilson. I don't understand why that's not an option.
It can be an option, certainly. We originally had it drawn at Hayfork Creek, and then we didn't want people on different sides of the street to be going to different schools. So that's how we ended up with this certain recommended boundary right here. But if it's the desire of the board to do the entire area that's shown with homes, we could do that at this time. But this development does continue. This isn't the whole development, and we won't be able to put the whole development into Emma Wilson. Down the road.
Isn't it true that there's only one student right now that would even be affected if you do this option 4?
That's correct. There's one student that attends McManus Elementary School that is in this boundary right now, and they would stay at McManus if they desire to. Just so the board does understand, we do a boundary assessment and enrollment projections every year, which you'll be seeing this winter. But in the one that we presented last year, you see about one student generated by every 3 single-family dwellings. So just to give you an idea how many students might be generated from a particular neighborhood.
Mr. Baltimore?
And just point of clarification, the reason this was one of the options was ease of communication to parents. If you bought a home that faced Hayfork, you were in this boundary. Where we've had before a boundary line that runs on the back end of homes, and then you really do need to check with the boundary or check it to see which school district you're in. So it was also a point to make it easy to communicate.
Are there further questions by the board?
Actually, yeah, just one more question on that. I don't know how involved, Kevin, you were on this too, but so I'm looking at, this is just my new, and I'm so sorry because I know it's late. I hate the idea of like neighboring kids not being at the same school, like essentially, but I know that it's going to expand out eventually. We don't know what that planned project is or how long it's going to take. But so there's these 3 homes that are on corners. So will those families be confused if they're technically facing Hayfork or if they're facing, the side streets? I don't even know what our orientation is here. Sorry, I don't know. It's totally minutia. I'm sorry.
That's okay.
I do appreciate the explanation and understanding the street-facing thing a little bit better.
Sure. So the homes, the very northern west side of the page that are purple there, so the backyards are backing up to the homes that are on Hayfork, but they're actually on Sloat. So those houses face Sloat, and they would fall into the Shasta boundary. So they're not actually a neighbor. And it's the address coincides with the street that they face. So everyone that is on it lives in an address on Hayfork Creek will go to Emma Wilson.
Anyone have any further clarifying questions? Is there any public comment that we've been made aware of? No?
There is no public comment on this item.
Thank you. Do I have a motion? Mr. Tennis?
So moved.
Second.
Well, hold up. May I?
Yes.
I just want to clarify at this point, are we moving the adoption of MAP 4?
Yes.
Map 4 is the recommendation, and that is my understanding that that was the motion.
That was the one that was recommended, and that was the one Julie presented and discussed.
Yes.
Very good.
Okay, then let's call for a vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye, and we are voting on map number 4.
Aye.
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 Aye. Thank you, board. That was 5-0. Motion is approved. And Caitlin, thank you for bringing my attention to the order. It made it easier. Thank you. Okay, next item is, again, Julie Kissel, and we are adopting resolution number 1531-21 regarding accounting of developer fees for fiscal year 1920.
Thank you. So as required by Government Code Section 66006B, the district is required to make an annual accounting for developer fees for the previous year and a 5-year report. So before you, you have the details of our developer fees, both what was brought in and what went out for the 1920 school year, as well as a running balance of the developer fee account for the last 5 years. And it also talks about the projects that are currently underway and where the dollars were spent. Are there any questions regarding this report?
Seeing none, do I have any public comments that we're aware of?
There are no public comments for this item.
Thank you. Okay, then I'd ask for a motion.
I move the adoption of resolution number 1531-21.
Is
I'll
there a
second
second?
that.
Ms. Dalby seconds that. Okay, so I have a motion by Ms. Kaiser and a second by Board Member Dalby to approve the resolution regarding accounting of developer fees for the fiscal year 2019 to 2020. All those in favor?
Aye.
It's unanimous. The motion is approved.
Thank you very much.
Okay, you can,
Thank you,
you
Julie.
can go to bed now, Julie.
Thank you, Julie.
Okay, Board, we now have discussion action on 2019-20 independent fiscal audit. Jacqueline, there you are. Your mic's not on.
Good evening, Board. So in front of you this evening is, believe it or not, the 2019-20 financial independent audit. So as a school district, we are required to have an annual independent financial audit by an outside firm as a school district. So we have a new firm this year, HM&S. They're a local Chico firm. So they came in and met with us over the summer. They go to our school sites in September, and they come back in October to finalize the financials. So I just want to point out that this is so much more than just the dollars. Along with the dollars comes a lot of compliance. So what the auditors do is they actually test for a lot of the compliance pieces of that. You know, are there phone logs to document absences? Did we follow the LCAP process correctly? Are there Title I requirements that we're documenting? So it's more than just the dollars behind it. So I do want to say that it involves many, many staff of the district office, as well as our school site staff. We have to shuffle around independent study files to make sure those are sampled correctly. We actually got one tested from our College Connection program this year. So I worked with Elaine out at Butte College to get that to our auditors here in our office. So the audit this year, with the new firm, comes a new set of eyes. So we did have 2 compliance findings this year. One was an internal controls compliance finding related to our ASB program. So we have met with school administration as well as John Shepherd to talk about the deficits that were in those accounts. There's some procedural components that are going to be implemented not only at that school site, but at all of our school sites that have ASBs. We know that that is a large exposure area for us, so we want to make sure that's well documented regardless of the staff involved. The other finding that we had was related to state compliance with kindergarten continuation. So if a kindergartner continues into kindergarten the following year, there must be a continuation form signed by both school site admin as well as the parent. And during the sample, there was one student who did not have that form. I've worked with Mr. Sullivan, Ted Sullivan, to inform the principals, the elementary principals of this procedure and this process, and they are all up to speed regarding the procedure that needs to get done regarding the form, and that will be taken into account this spring as we look at kids who either will or will not matriculate into first grade. Is there any specific questions regarding the audit?
No, thank you. Having been involved in an audit, they're very useful because they find our flaws before we screw up too bad. Kevin?
Well, I just want to add, there are no audit adjustments. So what that means is that the financial statements that we presented to the auditors required no adjustment after they had gone through their testing. And that really is a testament to Jacqueline, Marie, and the entire financial service staff, because the work that's done daily. You know, that doesn't happen just at the end of the year when everything's put together. That is the daily diligence and hard work that they go through. So anyway, kudos to them.
Thank you, Kevin. Credit and kudos to the staff. Thank you. This is an action item to adopt Resolution 153121 regarding accounting of developer, no. Next one down, we already did that. Thank you. The financial audit for 2019-2020. Is there a motion? Mr. Tennis. Thank you.
Second.
Thank you, Dr. Kaiser. Okay, we have a motion and a second. Do we have any comment?
We have no public comment on this one.
No public comment. Thank you. Okay, all those in favor of approving the independent financial audit with clarification that there were no adjustments necessary other than procedural. Board, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
None opposed, motion carries 5-0. Okay, information on the 2021 budget update. Mr. Baltima.
Okay, the budget cycle begins with the governor's proposal for the budget that will start effective July 1st. So the governor has provided us his projection for the 21-22 budget, and it really is a dramatic improvement from what we experienced really with the start of COVID and the projected decline in revenue statewide. Revenues, frankly, are outpacing even the pre-COVID estimates before the state budget was reduced. And it was noted earlier that our higher earners in California have weathered this pandemic better than those at the lower end of our socioeconomically scale. And frankly, our capital gains tax and those higher earners are driving continued increased revenues in the state of California. Reminder that we are funded on average daily attendance. However, the 2021 year, we have a hold harmless. So we will either receive the better of next year's ADA, the 21-22 year, which won't be known until April of 22, or the 19-20. We are skipping the 2021 year. We are not even recording or reporting ADA. So the governor's proposal includes a cost of living adjustment. We talk about a COLA at 3.84%, and that really is an acknowledgement of the COLA that effectively should have been implemented this year of 2.31%, and an estimated increased COLA next year for 1.5. Note that it's not a perfect mathematical equation on that, but it works out to be a 3.84% COLA. Oh, I apologize.
While you're waiting, which 2 years was that cost of living adjustment based on?
So the cost of living adjustment that statutorily is calculated for the current year, 2021, this year, at 2.31%, and then an acknowledgement for a 1.5% COLA in the 21-22 year. But the COLA that the governor's proposes is 3.84, effective July 1. It's important to note that not all programs receive a cost of living adjustment. That is really the local control funding formula. There are other state programs, special education, child nutrition, preschool, foster youth, and mandated block grant that will not receive, in essence, the acknowledgement of the prior year, but will only receive the 1.5% COLA. Special education early intervention grants, we're waiting to get the details on that, but we're not expecting an increase in revenue at that point. And importantly, the cash deferrals that we, I think, have talked to the board about that were implemented, that we're experiencing right now, nearly all of those are being bought down. And so we'll only have really one deferral that will push us out into the 21-22 year. Now, we're still experiencing the deferrals because they are related to the current 2021 Budget Act. And frankly, Chico Unified, because of having strong reserves, we are not having to look for other means of cash like a tax revenue anticipation note. So it's also important to note there is no additional PERS or STIRS money that's being put to buy down that liability in the future. However, it's noted that the prior dollars that the state government invested last year is actually having a bigger dividend payout, so the estimate of percentage increase is going down. So our multi-year projection will look better related to PERS and STIRS costs. So just want to point out that the governor's proposed some one-time dollars associated not only with the local control funding formula, that is the Safe Schools for All grants, and our estimate, a baseline estimate, this is not the additional dollars for our targeted students, would be over $5 million. That's $450 per average daily attendance. Thank you. Thank you. But there are certain things that we have to do to receive these dollars. We have to have a COVID-19 safety plan, which includes testing for staff and students. Collective bargaining agreements need to be met. And then we would have to provide for the first round to receive the whole $450, we would have to provide in-person instructions, TK through second grade by February 16th. And then we would have to expand in-person by March 15th to our TK through sixth grades. And it is required, I mean, the goal here is to incentivize in-person instruction. Now, we are already doing an AMP model, so we are meeting the in-person definition that the governor has provided at this point in time. And
Kevin, I have a question.
Yes.
When it says TK sixth, since our sixth grade are in with our seventh and eighth grade, are we still meeting that?
It is TK5 for districts that have middle schools.
Oh, thank you.
And that was provided in a clarification update.
So that's the state dollars, and again, the timeline to apply for that is February 1st, and that date doesn't seem to have changed yet, and now we're just days away from that. But Chico Unified is well positioned to at least apply for these dollars at this point in time. Along with state one-time dollars, really this is frankly the bigger pot of money is the state or the federal one-time dollars through the actually continuation and additional dollars through the elementary and secondary school emergency relief funds. So for Chico Unified, this is over $10 million of one-time dollars. And it's really additional allowed uses for addressing learning loss, but they did expand the definition to include facility repairs and note an improvement for air quality systems. So improvements to HVAC, heating, ventilation, air conditioning, air scrubbers in classrooms, those types of things are things that we could spend these dollars on.
When you say addressing learning loss, that could be spent on that as well, would that include additional intervention, counseling type services to meet those social emotional needs of our students as well that are probably a little bit greater at this point of our traumatic experience these last few years?
Absolutely.
Okay.
And I think the Ed Services Department is already having those conversations and trying to put together some plans for that. Anytime you're talking about one-time dollars, you really want to talk about thoughtful use, because they're not going to continue forever. So how do you really kind of get the biggest bang for your buck with those one-time dollars? So these are conversations that we'll bring back to you and the board with some ideas and recommendations. Oop. Sorry. So I tried to create the summary multi-year projection that you see when we do a regular budget update. And I included the cost of living adjustment as provided by the governor at a 3.84% in 21-22, and then additional 2.98% in the 22-23 year. And you can see our financial picture changes much dramatically and for the better, because as a reminder to the board, we were looking at some severe deficits in our out years, not only because of not receiving any additional money, but because of declining enrollment estimates. So what's interesting about this proposal for Chico Unified is that because we can use the 1920 ADA and the increased COLA, we're going to do really well financially, at least from a revenue perspective, well, and actually a change in fund balance perspective in the 21-22 year. Now that's no increased services to kids, which we know we need to provide, and that's no compensation, but we aren't running a deficit. But I think it's important to remind the board and our community that we will have a problem in the 22-23 year, even with these additional dollars. And that's really because of that declining enrollment piece, that if we don't make adjustments looking out into the future, we could be right back into that deficit spending pattern. Now, we do have very healthy reserves, so if you look at the bottom of this, you can see even in the 22-23 year, with a spending deficit of $500,000, we're still carrying over an $18 million fund balance beyond what we're required to keep from the state and the local board. So we're well positioned to handle this, but it is, again, prudent to talk about not only looking towards the 22-23 year, but also how do we use those one-time dollars to carry us through.
Mr. Baltimore, I have a question. Are we in a situation now where reaching the cap it comes into play?
Yes, it does. And so that is something else we're looking at. For the entire board, a number of years ago, the legislature, if certain tests were met, and there were 4 of them, that there would actually be a cap on the amount of reserves that a school district could keep as undesignated, basically. And so we've hit all 4 of those tests. And quite frankly, most people, and I think the legislature never thought we would hit all of those tests. And we'll bring back some more information on that. But there are things we can do. There are some recommendations that we can make with this board regarding our reserves. Because just from a financial standpoint, reserves aren't a bad thing. Now, philosophically, we're an education agency, so we take in dollars and we provide services to kids. That's what we do. We're not a bank. We don't want to just put money aside for the sake of putting it aside. However, having good reserves allows us to make better decisions. Having good reserves allows us to have enough cash even when the state doesn't pay us on time. And just as a kind of comparison, 1 month's payroll is over $9 million. So really, when you look at just a reserve, even at $18 million, that's really 2 months that we could pay everybody before we wouldn't have any cash available. So we'll see how that plays out. We'll bring more information to the board, but yes, we are going to look at having a cap on our reserves and some challenges with that. So thank you for noting that. So again, this is basically the governor's first proposal, and we will bring back, or he brings back an adjustment to his proposal in May.
called the May Revise, and at that point, they have better estimates of revenues from the state. So we're going to have to see what the legislative support is for this budget. Obviously, the COVID-19 impacts are still being felt, and this is all really good news, I think, for us on an educational side, but you just have to ask yourself, how do we pay for that, really? Is the economy really going to hold? And we'll see. We have a new president, and we have a Democratic majority in the Senate. So some of the things that we had heard from the federal side about fully funding special ed that we never thought maybe would happen even a few months ago, now looks like maybe real conversations and would be a large influx of dollars on the federal side. Again, not paying attention to how we all pay for that, but there is more positive news potentially for local education agencies related to the new administration. I can't emphasize this enough. Our Chico Unified School District enrollment is pivotal at this point in time, and it's more unknown than ever. In the past, we could look historically over a 3-year period to determine or give us an idea of what the future might hold. With the campfire and with COVID, that historical data trend has been broken. So we are projecting decline in enrollment, but I would not at all be surprised if we came back to you and that picture is completely flipped and maybe we're increasing. But I think at this point, from a financial standpoint, we need to plan in the most economic and prudent manner, which would really speak to us of a continued small decline in enrollment over the next 3 years. Our multi-year projections, is the enrollment going to happen? Are we going to really receive this COLA? Still a lot of questions about what the future years are going to look like for us. And then, as was mentioned, Prop 2, approved in 2014, is going to try and cap our reserves in the 22-23 year for clarification. So we'll have a little bit of time to talk about that and maybe provide some options and plans how to deal with that. So again, that's what we know to date, and things are changing. Are there any questions about the governor's proposal?
Thank you. Will we be getting any closer information through budget workshops that we're involved with the state?
Yes, we attended one today, and we also attended school services all online a couple days ago, so we're still working through that. But as information to the board, we will bring back an updated budget for the current fiscal year called the second interim. We'll do that in March, and this information will be included in that multi-year projection.
Thank you, Kevin. Board, any other questions at this time? The school services bulletins have been very timely. So, if you've got that service, check those bulletins. Okay, thank you. On to number 4, and I see that Mr. Cole has been nudged, so he's awake now. David Cole is the classified personnel director for the Personnel Commission. Mr. Cole.
Well, thank you. I appreciate the opportunity to talk to you for a few minutes this evening. One of the requests I had is to give a very brief overview of what a merit system is, and so I hope to do that in less than 3 minutes or so. But Chico is unique in that it's a merit system school district, which means that it operates much like a civil service system. The merit system operates under the rules of the Ed Code Section 45240 through Ed Code Section 45320. And what that does is it gives the commission specific rules on how to operate a classified system. So all of the staff in the HR department report through a personnel commission. To give some perspective on that, in California, there's about 1,000 school districts. And of the 1,000, 100 of those are merit system school districts. Of the 100, they represent about 60% of all classified employees in the state of California. So even though it's a relatively small number, 100 out of 1,000, it's a large number of employees that are represented within those classifications. The Personnel Commission consists of 3 members. You have a member who is the appointee of the board. You have a member who is the appointee of the classified union. And you have a third member who is the neutral, appointed by both of those members. As an example of how the merit system operates, if you were to have a new job that came to the commission, say a business analyst position, we would be told what those duties are and create a job description around that with all of the essential functions and qualifications. And then from that, we're required to meet with the merit subcommittee of the union. And so we would meet with that committee. discuss those qualifications, discuss the job requirements, meet with the district, reach a consensus, come back to the commission, have a final job description, and once it's approved, we create the internal test to determine whether or not someone's qualified for that position or not. This evening, as stated in the merit system, it operates under the authority of Ed Code Section 45245, which states one member of the Personnel Commission shall be appointed by the governing board of the district, and one member nominated by the classified employees of the district shall be appointed by the governing board of the district. These two members shall in turn appoint the third member. This evening, the Ed Code requires that the nominated name to the Personnel Commission for the classified union, Beverly Patrick, be brought to the board for appointment. The Ed Code requires that the board appoint this nominee from the classified union. Are there any questions or anything I could?
Any questions from the board? Okay, thank you. We need to act to approve the Personnel Commission member appointee for 3 years from CSEA, Beverly Patrick. Is there a motion?
I so move.
Is there a second?
There's no public comment on this item.
I will second that.
Thank you. Yes, Bev Patrick was a coworker of mine for a number of years at Pleasant Valley. Okay, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Motion passes 5-0. Okay, number 2, informational, intent to transfer clinicians from Butte County Office of Education to Chico Unified School District. Mr. Hanlon.
So this is an informational item only, so I just want to update you briefly. Currently, clinicians are employed through the Butte County Office of Education, and then they're assigned to schools here in Chico. There are currently 5 clinicians. They're assigned primarily to the emotionally disturbed classrooms, but also to students that have emotional challenges outside of those classrooms. It is not uncommon for Chico Unified to take programs from the county and transfer them. We are severely handicapped teachers. Back in the early 2000s, were a big group that came over. Last year, we took the occupational therapists, and this year, the clinicians. And the benefits there are they will be under the umbrella of student services, which will be under the direction of Diane Olson. And it's just a better coordination of services. When you get a district our size, programs are run a little bit differently than through the county. And so it's just have a better coordination of those services, and they're more in line with the goals of the board and the district. We will have a different kind of a model than what the county has traditionally served, and that's one of the primary reasons why we're looking at this. We will be able to use those counselors in different ways, primarily in cases of crisis, and be able to pull those off. Currently, we're not able to do that because they're not our employees, so the job description will be changed a bit. We are negotiating that with CUTA currently, and have provided a copy of our job description to them for comment. Anyway, that's kind of it. We expect that to happen in 2021, next year. The funding that pays for those services comes with it from the county, so that flows to the district. It's about $500,000, and then but also the cost then will be ours. So that's kind of it. Any questions?
Thank you. Any questions, board? Okay, hearing none. Thank you, Mr. Hanlon, for the update. And we are negotiating still with CUTA on some of the job description issues?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
And there's no public comment on this item.
We have comments on that item? No, thank you. Okay, items from the floor. Do we have any additional sign-ups or comments for items from the floor?
We do not.
Board member requests to agendize items. Board members, do we have anyone that would? Yes, Mr. Tennis.
I have one that kind of float out there a little bit. What's the situation with the shutdown? Because there was the there was a lifting of the shutdown the other day, but we're still shut down. What's going on there? I thought there was a curfew or something that was in place from late at night, 10 p.m. to 5 in the morning, but
No, we went to, almost back to where we were in the very, very beginning with the complete shutdown, where people were supposed to stay with their own families. Restaurants were shut down. It was takeout only. There was not outdoor dining. And that additional layer has now been lifted, so we're back in the purple. So the other one was kind of referred to, we were referring to it as a deep purple, and I think Mr. Lando had a clarification there.
Yeah, if you don't mind my butting in, the language is really unfortunate. We're still under a stay-at-home order. Temporarily, we had a regional stay-at-home order, which is what lumped us in with Sacramento. So the regional is lifted, but the original stay-at-home order from the beginning of the outbreak is still in place.
so what are the implications for public participation at this? When are we looking at getting members of the public back in here to, be heard on these issues? I mean, for example, there's an item from the floor here, not a particularly controversial meeting that we had here tonight, but, in the real world, somebody would be able to come forward, and if they didn't get a chance to be heard on some issue, now would be a time when they could get that in, and I just want to know when we can talk about it again.
It's determined by the state and the Butte County Board of Health, right? It's nothing to do with us.
So we did ask Butte County Public Health this question last time, and they did say that technically public gatherings, especially in an indoor location, were not allowed at this point.
And that will change when
That would change when we go to red.
we go from purple to red. What if we were in transition, like if a meeting had been agendized or something like that, and it went to red? Would we throw it open at the last minute, or would we stick with purple?
I think that would be a decision of the board.
But we won't have an opportunity to make that decision because we won't be in the context of a meeting. Can we put that on the agenda for when we go to red? We can, do we have to agendize that? I mean, could we just decide it
So we could
right now?
agendize at what point the board would move to in-person board meetings and what that would look like. So if we move to red, the board, I'm making possible language that we would move at the next meeting. We could move at, wait and move until the following agenda came out. That would be the decision the board would make. So
Doesn't the county health department say it has to be 2 weeks continuous status?
I am not sure that that is still the case on the movement of the colors. I don't know, Kathy.
I would like to request that we put on the agenda discussion of, when we can open these things back up again.
I would support putting it on because I think not only does the board need clarification, but so does the public. Is there any other member that would not like to? Right, or just a consensus?
Well, that's what I was
Yes.
going to ask, is just for clarification on procedure, these are these action items too when we agendize something?
Right.
I just don't know, I'm just asking. Okay.
Yes,
Gotcha.
This is the point where if a board member has a request to agendize an item, they would bring it up. Mr. Tennis has a request. The practice usually is that it's a board consensus. If we have a majority who says, yeah, we'd like to have that come back, that's what we do.
And yes, we would make that an action item at that agenda item.
Okay? I see all the heads shaking yes, so we'll move forward as the next agenda is developed to make sure that that issue and clarification is on the agenda.
Point of order, and I'm
Yes,
sorry to.
Mr. Landau.
I'm sorry to keep up with these procedural issues, but I really do want to clarify how this works. My understanding is that these requests should still be formal motions.
Correct.
So I hear that we all have nodded and said, yeah, that looks good, but I would really feel better if we had that on paper, as yes, we're going to agendize this.
Okay, I will ask for a formal motion.
First, though, I'd like to ask what would be like a point of clarification or something like that?
Yeah.
On a deal like this, though, isn't it easy for somebody to put something on the agenda?
Not
No?
necessarily.
Um,
No, Kelly, you want to explain how we go through screening, whether or not and when?
Sure. So anybody can request to put a item on the agenda, and certainly the board can request to put an item on the agenda, and what we want to do is make sure that the board as a whole all has an interest in spending the time discussing that item. So that's why this was put back on here, so we could have a very clear process for board members to put items on the agenda. So in this case, it would need a motion, which I think has been made, a second, and then follow our life of a motion process.
I move that we establish a firm protocol for opening the meetings back up once we have moved to the red tier.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Sure, I'll second that.
Thank you, Mr. Landau. Any further discussion on the motion to agendize, formally setting up protocols and procedures for when we reopen to bring the public to our meetings? Okay, seeing no further discussion, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Dr. Kaiser, did you vote?
Yeah.
Okay.
What'd you say?
Thank you. And that passes 5-0. Thank you. I'm sorry, I didn't have my mic on. I think we're at the adjournment point.
I'd like to make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
That's non-debatable, so we're gone.
And I got a motion in for the night.